guess.
Struggling economically.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Barry Gray in the WMCA studios in New York. In a moment, we're going to join our listeners in Buffalo on WBNY. Tonight's broadcast brought to you by Sauce Arturo, the Whitestone Press, Nat Sherman Cigars and Cigarettes. The Dandy Mattress Company presents the news, Northwest Orient Airlines, the Comer Marcus Company, Zion Kosher Meat Products, Sweet Touchney Tea, Empire Furniture Factories, Fieldston Green Apartments, and Stumer's Bread. And now, once again, Barry Gray on WMCA New York, and as of this instant, we're live on WBNY in Buffalo, another member of the Strauss Broadcasting Group. Tonight, as a matter of fact, in just a moment or two, I'll be talking with Dick Powell, who's reporting from Hollywood via our Strauss beeper phones. Then I'll be talking in the studio to Malcolm X. He is the leader of the nationalist Negro movement known as the Muslims, and Mr. X early this morning met with Cuba's Fidel Castro here at the Hotel Teresa in New York. Let me meet now Mr. Malcolm X, leader of the nationalist Negro movement known as the Muslims, who early this morning met at the Hotel Teresa in Harlem with Fidel Castro. You would call that an accurate description of the group and the day's events?
Most inaccurate.
Go ahead. Straighten me out.
Well, thank you, Mr. Gray. And I would like to point out that when you refer to us or to me as the leader of the black nationalist Negro group in Harlem, known as the Muslims, I don't think that you could say anything that would be farther from the truth.
I didn't use the word black. I'll read it again. I said leader of the nationalist Negro movement known as the Muslims.
Yes, well, that's worse yet.
Well, that's me. I keep getting my foot in it.
That's right. A Muslim, a nationalist, and I think it should be explained to you the difference between a Muslim and a nationalist. The black nationalists, a Muslim, we're Muslims. And a Muslim is one who believes that there's no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the apostle of Allah. We're not known as Muslims, we are Muslims. And a nationalist usually is a political group whose objective is the betterment of the black man, but usually they don't stress religion, they don't stress God, nor do they stress moral reformation. Now, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the one whom I represent, is the spiritual head of the fastest growing group of black Muslims in the Western Hemisphere. And by Muslims, we mean that we are a religious group. We believe in God. We believe in moral reformation. And as you probably recall, in the Time magazine a year ago in July, they referred to him as one of the greatest moral reformers who has ever appeared among the so-called Negroes, because he has absolutely been successful in eliminating the addiction to dope, to tobacco, to alcohol. We're anti-alcohol, anti-tobacco, anti-dope, anti-adultery, anti-prostitution, anti-stealing, anti-anything that's contrary to the law. So I would like to make that point. We are a religious group of Muslims. We are not, as you would put it, black nationalists.
I didn't say black nationalists.
Well, Negro nationalists. And there's no such thing as a Negro nationalist. A Negro never thinks of his own kind to the extent where he has the spirit of nationalism. When a man begins to refer to himself as a nationalist, he refers to himself as a black man.
Mr. X, that was just what you've just said is just because of my introduction. I'm almost afraid to ask the first question.
Yes, sir, but I mean, I wanted to straighten that out because
we may be here till dawn.
That's correct. But I think it's better to be here until dawn and have the correct opinion of each other than to be misinformed.
I take back the introduction, and you are the leader, the associate leader of what?
I am Mr. Elijah Muhammad's representative or minister to the Muslims in the New York area, a religious group who follows the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Now, Bob Sylvester, you certainly may if Mr. X doesn't. But you have to get on mic.
All right.
We don't have booms.
I would like to ask just a very, I hope, a very inoffensive and kind question.
I have seen so. I'm very interested in jazz music, and I've seen so many jazz musicians go to the trend of what they call Islamic. Is that yours?
We who follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad abstain from the show world or show business because usually to participate in that you're surrounded by alcohol and you're surrounded by people who are drunk. You're surrounded by people who are out trying to have a good time. It's an environment that can cause a lot of trouble. And when we follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we try to avoid trouble. And one of the best places to stay away from, if you want to avoid trouble, is nightclubs where people get drunk and usually don't know what they're doing or what they're saying.
And yet every one of the boys that I know that have gone to what they call Islamic do not drink, do not smoke. They do drink coffee, and they're very quiet. Is it the same?
All Muslims are the same. A Muslim is a brother.
I will retire.
No, it's all right, Bob. You made one statement, Mr. X. You said that something about having a good time. Would you just recall that for me a moment ago?
No, you'll have to recall it.
You're not against having a good time, are you?
We're not against having a clean good time. See, Mr. Muhammad emphasizes
this
cleanliness.
Is all relevant, I think,
yes,
when you get into the word clean.
Clean, yes. Well, it's a person's... some people have a different conception of clean, but we who follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad take it for exactly what it means. We try and clean ourselves up physically, morally, spiritually, and otherwise.
Isn't it true that a cafe singer named Roy Hamilton appeared at your Harlem Roundup recently?
Yes, sir.
Well, isn't he a nightclub entertainer?
He sings in the nightclub.
Well, you wouldn't decry his method of earning a living.
We don't decry his method of earning a living. But I say we who follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to the best that we can avoid any involvement in any environment that's not conducive to good morals. And we have many of our brothers who used to be in show business. After they are in a position economically to leave it, they leave it. As you know yourself, most of our people, most of the so-called Negroes who have become quite famous in show business usually die in poverty. They don't have
That's not because of show business.
No, it's not because of show business. It's because of the system.
What system is that, Mr. X? This is way off our original discussion.
I think we better get to our original discussion.
I'm curious as about the system. What are we talking about now?
Well, sir, you take show business. Take, for instance, they say that Ella Fitzgerald is the queen, but Ella Fitzgerald is still struggling. Struggling economically, wherein
I'll never know why.
Wherein people who come along and imitate her go beyond her. They get television shows. They go forward. There are no barriers, no obstacles in their path.
You're telling me now that there are barriers because Ella Fitzgerald is a Negro?
Because she's non-white, I would say there are barriers, yes.
Well, how about Harry Belafonte and Sammy Davis and Sidney Poitier?
They're in a category. I'd say that Sammy Davis is in a unique category.
He's a great entertainer. That's why he's unique.
All by himself. He's in a unique category all by himself.
What about Sidney Poitier?
He's in a unique category all by himself, and he's respected somewhat. I should say he's respected, but I think you'll find that many of the so-called Negro musicians or entertainers who have crossed the line marriage-wise, very seldom do you find their audiences remain predominantly so-called Negro. Usually their billings or their dates or their schedules they're more downtown or in white theaters or nightclubs predominantly patronized by whites than among their own kind. For instance, there are some so-called Negro entertainers who, after undertaking a white wife, for instance, you could go all over Harlem and never find one of their records on the Nickelodeon.
Well, whose fault is that?
Well, that's not the point. Still, the point is, after they make such moves, it affects them with their own people more so than is commonly realized. Now, that's not dealing in any specific personalities, but I say...
I don't know what this has got to do with our discussion.
Well, you brought it up.
No, you said that the system created a great deal of anguish, I guess is the word, that Ella Fitzgerald wasn't doing so well. The last time I looked, Ella Fitzgerald was the highest paid singer of her kind.
Mr. Gray, that the majority of it, you can always pull out exceptions.
Well, you named Ella Fitzgerald.
No, that's right, but still, you can always pull out exceptions. But the majority of the so-called Negro entertainers whether it's in the actual field of music or whether it's in the field of sports, like fighting. Usually, despite the amount of money that they draw in at the gate, they end up in poverty.
Well, that would be the fault of their economic advisors or their own bad inherent sense of business. You can't blame the system for that.
When the system is responsible for their bad, as you call it, inherent sense of business. The system, the environment under which they grow up, is responsible for their bad sense of
Let me
business.
tell you about an example that perhaps you do not know, and perhaps I'm telling tales out of school because we are very good friends. But Sidney Poitier is a Negro actor of great stature and very widely respected. And Mr. Poitier, who is in his mid-30s, actually today will never have to work again if he doesn't care to, because he's been so well advised and so well set up in a financial way that literally he will never have to work again if he doesn't wish to.
Yes.
Fortunately, he wishes to.
Yes, well,
So the responsibility of finding proper advisors would seem to be upon the performer. The public can't be blamed, or the show business bookers can't be blamed because someone who earns $5 or $10 or $20,000 a week is not wise enough to entrust it to someone who is honest and gives good advice. And there are hundreds of such people around. All you have to do is find them.
Yes, well, you find them, sir.
Oh, I'd be glad to give you the name of a good business manager.
Yes, sir. Well, I'm not looking for one. I think I have the best business manager in the world, and that's the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Now, if you want to get to him...
Do you have a statement of net worth with you so we can judge this?
Sir?
No, that's a joke. Ladies and gentlemen, before we get into the next segment of this discussion, a brief reintroduction. I'm talking with Malcolm X. He is an associate of Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the group known as the Muslims. Is that correct?
He's the leader of the Muslims in the largest group of black Muslims in the Western Hemisphere. They're not known as the Muslims, they are Muslims. Just like you're not known as Barry Gray, you are Barry Gray.
You want to bet? Let's pause here for the news after this important minute in New York and in Buffalo. Ladies and gentlemen, in New York and in Buffalo, Mr. Malcolm X, representative of Muhammad Elijah, leader of the Muslim group, I guess in the United States. It's a national movement.
Elijah Muhammad.
I'm sorry.
The spiritual leader of the black Muslims in the Western Hemisphere.
How many members does he have, or followers?
I've never heard him say.
Do you have any idea?
No. Anybody who's in a position to know how many followers he has wouldn't say, and anybody who says is not in a position to know.
Let me ask you, Mr. X, why did you visit Fidel Castro this morning?
Well, you have to understand it like this. Because of the climate that has been produced by the trouble in Africa, in the Congo, in Kenya, and other places, it has caused a great deal of tension in Harlem. And based on that, some representatives from the 28th Precinct a few weeks ago visited our restaurant, and they were discussing these incidents that stemmed from this tension, and they asked us for suggestions on some of the best ways to combat it. So we suggested that they, instead of condemning the leaders of these different nationalist groups, that they get all of them together at the Amsterdam News Office, where they have the 28th Precinct Community Council at the Amsterdam News Office. I think it's once a month. So that they took this suggestion, and at this meeting about 3 or 4 weeks ago, a sort of a working unity was brought about by the editor of the Amsterdam News and Captain Noonan of the 28th Precinct and Patrolman Sosis, who handles, I think, the public relations or something or other. So it was suggested that working with just that element wasn't sufficient, but to get that element of leaders together with the civic leaders, the business leaders, and whatnot there in Harlem. So last Friday, a meeting was held at the Amsterdam News Office, presided over by James Hicks, the editor, and Captain Noonan and Sosis, and I think Inspector Whalen was there, and Lieutenant Seeley. Plus, there was Commissioner Dumpson of the Department of Welfare, and Dr. Alfred Morrow, the ex-commissioner, and John B. King, Reverend Dempsey, the mayor on Harlem, Dr. Allen, Nathan Friedman, and Vernell Pemberton, assistants to the superintendent of districts. There was Norman Saunders from the mayor's committee was there. And
I believe you, Mr.
Well,
X.
all right.
Go ahead.
I want you to know who was there so you'll know why I was in Fidel Castro's room. Since you want to know, we'll get the details. One of the first things that was brought up at this meeting was that there were many African dignitaries being brought to America during the UN session, and that these African dignitaries would want to visit Harlem. And the 28th Precinct, or the police department, was very concerned that there wouldn't be a repetition of the incident that took place when President Sékou Touré of Guinea was there. So they were asking for suggestions, and it was brought out that one of the primary reasons that this incident took place was because of improper representation on the committee or whatever it was that brought him there. There was just one element involved in the bringing of him there. Therefore, it left a lot of dissatisfied elements, and that those different ingredients caused a combustion of booing and so forth that was embarrassing. So it was suggested that a committee be set up, and this committee was supposed to be representative of all of the elements in Harlem, the nationalist elements, the Christian elements, the fraternal elements, the business elements, and so forth. And I was selected on that committee to be responsible for representing and welcoming any dignitary that came to Harlem. And when the meeting was breaking up, I asked Mr. Hicks about how to form the thing together, and he said, well, since your name was mentioned, you take the initiative in getting the others together. So then what night was that? Last night? Monday night. Monday night, we heard that Fidel Castro was coming to the Teresa, which was unbelievable.
He had a due bill that didn't work at the Shelburne.
Well, that's what somebody said, but I'm inclined not to go along with everything that I hear. So we went to the Teresa, and when we got there, the place was packed, jammed, and there was a lot of confusion and excitement. Now, I would like to state right here that one of the reasons that we were selected, or the Muslims were selected to be represented on any committee that had anything to do with representing any dignitaries to Harlem, the police department recognizes the fact that out of all of the groups in Harlem, those who are the most, you can't find a better disciplined group or a more, I don't care what propaganda you say about us, you can't find a more disciplined group or a group that's more law-abiding than the followers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and you can't find a group that's more cooperative with law enforcement officers. And so when this jam occurred there at the Teresa, the police officials, we could never have been in the Teresa had not the police allowed us there. They put out the reporters. They put out everyone. But they allowed us to stay there because Inspector Whalen was at the meeting when this committee was set up. And since he's responsible for all of the safety of the dignitaries, I think in the 10th Division, he let the committee that was selected stay in the Teresa Hotel.
Mr. X, I believe you. I still ask the question.
I'm giving you some background. I don't intend to leave anything out because I've had sufficient...
We've only got 2 hours.
I understand.
We have other guests, Mr. X.
All right.
Democracy is one of the precepts of your organization.
It is, sir.
Free speech for everyone?
Yes, sir. But you can take... see, I came because Mr. Kirschenbaum...
I've heard of him.
...told me that he wanted an objective report. And I don't think that whenever you are involved with a man as controversial as Dr. Castro and as controversial as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, you don't just make statements that you don't explain, because people take them and twist them and make more out of them than what you mean.
I'm listening.
Now,
so you were at the Teresa.
So we left. After they had brought Dr. Castro in, we left. And then we received a call at our restaurant at 116th and Lenox. I got to get that plug in. Best restaurant in New York.
You'll pay for that, pal.
And they asked us to come to the Teresa Hotel that Dr. Castro wanted to see us. I was shocked.
Yeah.
And but we got the committee together and went back. When we went back with the Muslims, the police let us through their lines.
Right.
We were led by them up to the 9th floor and into Dr. Castro's room. And he greeted us very cordially. And he greeted us very cordially. We sat down. The room wasn't so big, and in fact, it was crowded with his entourage. And we were allowed to take in, I think, about 5. 2 Negro reporters and a cameraman and 4 of the brothers. And so that was that.
Any difference between a Negro reporter and any other kind, Mr. X?
If you go to Mississippi, there's a difference. And you don't have to go to Mississippi. You can go right here in New York. Yes, there is a difference, sir. You don't
Not to me.
Don't ask me you're an individual. Don't ask me a question that you don't want a blunt answer from.
Oh,
Yes, there is. Yes,
I
there
asked-
is a difference. And I'm surprised that you,
Mr.
Gray.
X, when I ask a question, I expect an answer.
Well, Mr. Gray,
I expect a polite answer, but I expect an answer.
Yes, sir. I'm surprised that you, a man as intelligent and experienced as you are, and as informed as you are with world affairs, should ask me, is there any difference between a Negro reporter and a white reporter?
Mr. X, if as a broadcaster, for many, many years, I would never refer to a reporter as a Negro reporter,
Well, had these
or an
reporters-
Arab reporter,
Sir.
or a Jewish reporter. He's a reporter.
Sir.
And if I did it, I would be accused of making various remarks that tend to segregated thought.
As if these reporters had not been so-called Negroes, perhaps they wouldn't have gotten in. There is a
that's
difference.
ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
Don't say it is.
Now, let me read you something from from a publication called The New Crusader. What is The New Crusader, Mr. X?
The New Crusader is a paper that's printed in Chicago. It's a weekly. It's a weekly so-called Negro newspaper.
It's your newspaper, isn't it?
No,
I
it's
mean,
not.
Well, when I say yours, I mean the Muslim.
No, the Muslims do not have a newspaper.
Well, doesn't Elijah Muhammad write for the New Crusader?
Lerner writes for the Post. Is that his paper?
Yes, you would refer to the Post as Lerner's
He
paper.
works for the paper, or he has a column.
Does
for the
Elijah Muhammad work for the New
No, sir.
Crusader?
He does not work for
But
it.
he writes for
He
them.
submits a column to the
All right.
weekly Negro press across the
I'm not-
country, and those who want to print it, print it. Those who don't
Mr.
print
X, this isn't a trial. I'm simply asking you, I hope, a pleasant question.
Yes,
Is
sir.
this Mr. Muhammad's column that you
Yes,
look
sir.
at? It is.
Yes,
All
sir.
right. He wrote it. He says here, the final war between Allah, God, in parentheses, and the devils is dangerously close. The very least amount of friction can bring it into action within minutes. There's no such thing as getting ready for this most terrible and dreadful war. They are ready. Preparation for the battle between man and man or nations has been made and carried out on land and water for the past 6,000 years. Man has now become very wise and has learned many of the secrets of nature, which make the old battles with swords and bows and arrows look like child's play. Since 1914, which was the end of the time given to the devils, and in parentheses, white race, to rule the original people, black nation, man has been prepared for a final showdown in the skies. What does that mean, Mr. X?
What do you mean? What does it mean? It means the same thing that all religion teaches. The Christian religion teaches you that there will come a time when there will be a showdown between God and the devil.
Right.
The Christian Bible clearly states, and all Christians teach, that there'll come a time when God will destroy all non-Christians. This is the Christian gospel. And the only thing now, and yet when they say that, Christians are never accused of being anti-anyone. They're just congratulated or complimented for being good Christians.
Which testament are we referring to?
And I think that you'll find that your theologians, Mr. Gray, constantly refer today to the War of Armageddon. Dean Acheson, when Douglas MacArthur was called back to this country some years ago, when he made his speech in the Senate, he referred to the battle that was shaping up as Armageddon. Now, in most Negro churches, they teach Negroes that the War of Armageddon is something that's going to be fought between spirits up in the sky someplace. But Dean Acheson, who was Secretary of State, and Douglas MacArthur, who was one of the generals out there in the Pacific, he referred to the War of Armageddon as being right here on this earth between God and the devil.
Mr. X, I really wanted to ask a very simple question. Doesn't Mr. Muhammad, your leader, talk about the battle between the black and the white, and isn't this the basis of his entire platform?
He teaches us that God is going to destroy the wicked. Now, who are the wicked? All you have to do is look around on this earth and find out who it is has committed the acts of a wicked man. Who is the thief? Who is the robber? Who is the enslaver? Who is the lyncher? Who is the colonizer? Now, if I point to a man and say he's a colonizer, or he's a a lyncher, which is a murderer, or he's an enslaver, that doesn't mean I'm teaching hate, unless I am saying that that man has done something that he hasn't done. And what Mr. Muhammad teaches us basically is that God is going to destroy the wicked. Now, nobody has to worry about that except those who are guilty of having done wickedness.
Does that include the Congolese troops as well?
How do you mean?
Well, the wicked, those who have committed murder, rape, arson, assault.
I'm surprised how, and excuse me, how a white man who knows the history of the Belgian Congo or of the Congo.
No, we're talking about wicked people.
Yes, I'm surprised that you, as a white man and as an intelligent person who knows the history of Belgian colonialization in the Congo and what they did, and I regret to say, Mr. Gray.
Well, they did bad things too. And we're talking about the wicked without regard for race.
If you can put a man in the electric chair for crimes that he has committed, and you murder him for the murder that he has done, then you're not wicked for giving him justice or repaying him in a just way for what he has done.
Well, justice means also includes the words due process, and there's nothing due process about the marauding troops of the
justice is to balance the scale.
Due process, sir, is
justice,
the words that have been used since the beginning of Anglo-Saxon justice.
Mr. Gray,
yes.
I think you'll find that the Belgians murdered millions and millions and millions of Congolese.
All Belgians.
Well, when I say Belgian, those who were in power over them. Plus
you mean women with 5 children conducted the murdering, or they just paid for the crime?
I was at an interview where reporters asked Mr. Wigger Mary, who the Congolese government had designated to look into this so-called atrocities by the Congolese troops, and he claimed that he didn't see any signs of it.
Well, that happens to be a flat untruth.
Yes, but I think
reports from all observers,
yes,
including Mr. Lumumba,
yes,
have been fairly well authenticated.
They're reaping what they sowed. Whatever happened
the women with 5 children.
What happened to the Belgians in the Congo, sir? They reaped what they sowed. A man cannot he can't reap other than what he sowed. It didn't happen to the English. The same thing didn't happen to the English when they withdrew from places they had colonized and didn't commit atrocities. And it didn't happen to any colonial power that withdrew and did not commit these atrocities.
You think then that the Congolese troops were exactly correct in their attitude?
I'm not certain of what the attitude was because I wasn't there. And
what do you think of Patrice Lumumba, from what you've read? You think he's a wise statesman?
Well, I will say that he is one person who has brought unity among all of the colonial powers in that they all dislike him. They all united against him.
It also seems that the Russians dumped him today, too.
Well, I see, all of that's politics, which I don't follow too closely, being a religious man.
I can tell.
But at the same time, I'm interested in the betterment and the elevation of the black man. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is a religious leader and a religious teacher who's not interested in politics.
Aren't you interested in mankind?
How do you mean, mankind?
Well, you said you were interested in the black man. I thought perhaps you'd be interested in all mankind.
Mr. Gray, since when has the white man become so interested in mankind?
Well, I'm not the spokesman for the white man. I'm only the spokesman for this white man.
Today, when I say today, in this era, the white man today all of a sudden has become the chief spokesman for humane acts.
Mr. X, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. With this country, in the last 180 years, has given birth to some great men who have undertaken to advance the cause of all peoples, including the Negro, from the day of their thinking and diplomatic activities. I give you Harry Truman, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln, Benjamin Franklin. I can give you a list that would take us the rest of the evening. You mean these white men were evil too?
The first man that you mentioned just said that the sit-ins in the South should be arrested and put in jail, Harry Truman.
That is not an accurate and exact statement, and Mr. Truman has cleared it up 3 or 4 times. You read the first statement, you didn't read the second. But let's go to the others. You mean these white men never thought of anybody else?
Delano Roosevelt was president of the
we're
United States
we're
for
on
13
camera.
years. and had more power, perhaps, than
So
any
we
other
are.
man that sat in that
Yeah.
chair.
So we are
And
on
So
camera.
we
Roosevelt
are.
had been a
We
friend
are
of the
now on.
so-called
We are now
Negro.
live.
The
I was looking at
so-called
the
Negro was still knocking
I
on
was
the
looking at the
doors
other
of the White
window on
House
the
today,
delay.
begging for civil rights,
Yeah.
begging for
Hey,
civil
everybody.
Hey, everybody.
Welcome back to Subversive History.
Yeah. So far, so good. No catastrophic failure of any sort, which is
You may notice we're streaming on a Monday,
yeah, little different.
which is not per our routine. But yesterday I was strapped in for the pending riot that was going to potentially ensue in Philadelphia. I wanted to make sure that I was able to witness such a thing and also spend a little bit of time with my family. So we did reschedule for today so that I could be with my father and my brother, and I could potentially show my girlfriend a good old Philadelphia riot if one were to ensue. Fortunately or unfortunately, that did not happen,
Yeah.
depending on which side of the fence you are on that one. But we're here today
Yeah. Sadly, the rains
to pick up
blessed
where we left off with. There was still some.
So there was some
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Just
light rioting.
there was light rioting in Center City, but nothing compared to like what it would have been if they would have won. If they would have won, it would have been chaos.
Yeah. Did they even bother to grease the lampposts or anything yet?
Yeah,
Oh,
they
okay. All
definitely.
right. That was already taken care of.
And the whole Center City was like furnished with riot police and shit.
But you
So
know,
they were prepped. It was raining and they lost, and it just didn't really. There was some people climbed poles, people set off fireworks and stuff like that, but nothing real major happened.
yeah, my wife was showing me a TikTok or a video of people tipping over a car just preemptively, I guess.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
think I saw that too.
Yeah. But you know, luckily the rains blessed the city of Philadelphia, and
Yep.
you know,
But if you're wondering why we weren't here yesterday and we're here now,
it's because the Eagles.
that was the main reason. Because the Eagles, yeah. Well, because that's the thing. If I was sitting here streaming and they won, there's no way that I wouldn't be like, dude, I have to leave right now. I have to go. There's a momentous occasion outside where they will be flipping cars, and I will have to be there to see that.
No, it's not a football related. It's
Riot related than football related. It's more.
it's Eagles related. I don't know if you can tell where the inspiration came from for the badge in front of your name. I'm kidding. So,
Yeah.
all right, let's get this started. Subversive History is a multimedia community project seeking to bring attention to the revolutionary struggles of the world's often unsung and frequently misunderstood sectors. These are the stories of the demonized, vilified, whitewashed, or otherwise forgotten campaigns against imperialism, colonialism, capitalist exploitation, and racial apartheid. The orthodoxy of Western hegemony has often labeled these dissidents as subversive, and these are the struggles we aim to illuminate. And we are kicking off Chapter 3 of Peniel E. Joseph's The Sword and the Shield. This one is titled The World Stage, and it goes... actually, I found this chapter to be very Malcolm heavy. Really, yeah.
Is it so? Are you able to pull it up on the stream?
Yeah.
Like I said before, it's dueling chapters. The way the first chapter was about the radical citizenship of, the radical dignity of Malcolm X, and the second was the radical citizenship of Martin Luther King. Now this is the world stage, and this one focuses completely on Malcolm. Not completely, but like very heavy on Malcolm, and the next chapter will be a very heavy MLK chapter. So the book kind of does that consistently throughout, is that it's going to be like Malcolm Martin.
Oh, okay. I thought that it was going to be, at least like a combination after like the intro, like, chapter 1, chapter 2.
Nope. It still follows this pretty and you'll notice in this chapter as well, they bring up Martin like several times, but mostly as a way to like bolster or highlight either differences or similarities with Malcolm. This is a Malcolm chapter for sure.
Right.
And the next one will be a Martin chapter. So I think that's a cool way. It's it's kind of an interesting way to go through it, you know what I mean? And it's kind of cool for our format also because it gives us that ability to really hone in on each individual for like long periods of time, or at least relatively long periods of time,
Yeah.
and give each of them like kind of these sequential streams highlighting them, and then go back and forth with that.
Well, I think it's great.
I think it's neat.
I think it's neat.
I think it's just dandy.
Let's oh, no. There we go.
There we go.
Do you want to get
I'll
us started? All right.
Yeah, I'll kick it off here. All right. So the world stage. In 1959, Malcolm X, like King, explored the international contours of the Black freedom struggle. Malcolm's first trip abroad expanded his political vision, organizational ambitions, and intellectual yearnings. Touring parts of the Middle East gave him a new appreciation for the expansiveness of the struggle for Black dignity. He identified with Muslims and the larger pan Arab world through a shared religion and understood anti colonial struggles as part of his own freedom quest. Malcolm's sojourn abroad also gave him the opportunity to flex new political muscles. He comfortably took on the role of both Nation of Islam surrogate and international diplomat, eager to negotiate stronger ties between the messenger, Elijah Muhammad, and the larger Arab world. The messenger and his followers were sensitive to allegations that their religious practices fell outside the boundaries of Orthodox Islam. But as the Nation of Islam's financial resources grew, so did Elijah Muhammad's efforts to be considered a part of the global Islamic community. Muhammad began a correspondence with Egyptian leader Gamal Abdel Nasser by congratulating him on the successful Afro-Asian People Solidarity Conference in Cairo that convened December 26, 1957 to January 1st, 1958. This initiated a cordial relationship that resulted in the Egyptian government inviting Muhammad to make his Hajj to Mecca, an invitation that he delayed in accepting, opting to send Malcolm and his envoy instead. Malcolm applied for his first U.S. passport 1 week after turning 35. In the Middle East, he became a freelance diplomat who courted the heads of the newly liberated third world nations. So we see here this continuing relation between this third worldist element to Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, where they continue to be inspired by the third world as they survey their own liberation struggle within the United States domestically. Now they're starting to take notice to these places. For Martin Luther King, as we talked about before, he was looking at visiting Ghana, visiting India. Now we have Malcolm, obviously a devout Muslim, going to places like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Sudan.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty wild when I don't know if this is in like the probably the next slide because it keeps happening, but the part where he says that he like struggled to like pray along with people because he like doesn't speak Arabic. I was like, all right, so the Nation of Islam, like they don't even pray in Arabic.
Yeah, and that's kind of what they're even saying here. You know what I mean? The messenger and his followers were sensitive to allegations that their religious practices fell outside the boundaries of Orthodox Islam. So you know what I mean? Like
So
we
it's
are
like,
seeing
how the fuck are you following the Quran though? It's in Arabic.
well, I'm sure there's translated ones.
I mean, yeah, there's translated ones, but I
Not
think
like that's
like
the only one you can read the Quran.
well, no, it's kind of like like the Torah, like you read it in Hebrew. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like these are I guess
I don't actually know that for sure.
well the thing the,
If
the,
you say that, I believe you, but I'm not. I never
you've
have
never
been through
you've
that.
never been to anybody's like bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah.
Actually, I haven't.
Ah, it's great.
It sounds fun.
um yeah, you listen to everything the Honorable Elijah Muhammad tells you. It sounds very Catholic, where it's just like, yeah, just do what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad tells you. You don't need to read the book yourself.
Right.
There's all kinds of things in there that you're not gonna get, and it's just it's very very weird because I think that like a lot of people like to throw around like Judeo-Christian, but like there's actually a lot
Mhm.
more similarities between Islam and Christianity than there are between Judaism and Christianity. But one of the big
Per-
things, what's
Sorry,
that?
buddy. Go ahead. Go ahead. No, I'm sorry.
One of
I thought
the
you were-
big things about like Judaism and Islam is that assalamu alaikum grams and or malaikum Allah salam. One of the big things about it is that like I think you're like supposed to read it in Arabic. You know. I don't. I could be wrong. I don't know. I'm
sure.
not. I'm
But
not Muslim. I don't.
I'm in a world. I'm actually currently in a world religion class, and I'm only three modules in at this point. But it is something that is striking to me as I read through. Like the first three modules have been on the Abrahamic religions, and you know, it is interesting to like why is there that fixation on? And we're going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but that's okay. Where they like you'll hear people like Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro or whoever, whoever these kind of like Anglophiles, let's say, the way that they tout Western values and they equate that with Judeo-Christian values as though they are two like causally related things that drive progressive civilization. Though they leave out Islam, even though they are like Islam is just as much, a part of like as much as like you can say like Judeo-Christian, you should be able to factor Islamism into them. They're at a similar parity in terms of their origin, being Abrahamic religions,
Right.
believing in similar prophets, and having a lot of very similar tenets as well.
Right.
There's an interesting level of xenophobia that excludes Islam from that, and there's also like just like a very interesting amount of just misconception in it as well because there's plenty Christianity is almost it's the second biggest, it's the second largest religion in Africa by
Right.
far.
Yeah.
It's almost at parity with Islamism, and there's many troubled Christian sects in the nation of Africa.
Oh, yeah.
But for some reason, the Judeo-Christian values that they uphold sometimes very violently and they impose very violently. There's Christian terrorist groups in Africa,
Yeah.
but for some reason, when Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson act like Judeo-Christian values are some kind of like a silver bullet for the way that society should be built, they neglect to mention how Christianity is the largest religion in the world. Yet
Okay.
there's many not, I would say, not progressive adaptations of this.
No. And the other like comical thing is that like I feel like a lot more like conservative Christians or whatever would probably find Jesus as I understand in the Quran, right, to be a lot more badass because he's just like waiting in heaven to do like war against the Antichrist and stuff, whereas like Torah ain't got none of that.
Yeah. Well, even now you're seeing like a shift of like conservative like belief into like Islamism also, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Where it's like you have like Andrew Tate converting to Islam and now a bunch of like,
But is he really?
I don't know. Let's move to the next slide.
Got it.
We're getting way well. I've brought up the cardinal sin of bringing up Andrew Tate in this stream,
Yes.
so
Yes.
we should just move on.
Strike one.
Yeah, you're right.
Malcolm arrived in Cairo on Saturday, July 4th, 1959. Like King's glorious reception in India, the Egyptian government received him as a visiting dignitary, housed him in an elegant hotel, and placed Vice President Anwar Sadat at his disposal. Malcolm's first encounter with the Arab world was eye-opening, as he fumbled through prayers with little knowledge of Arabic, but he conversed intently with diplomats, clerics, and official emissaries about the fight for racial justice in America, and he grew excited upon finding that the people in the Middle East reminded him of home. These kindred spirits pushed Malcolm to expand his political imagination. He encountered light-skinned and near-white Muslims who shared his thirst for political liberation of all oppressed people, which, by the way, I'm going to make a comment about, like, whiteness in a second. 99% of them, Arabs, would be Jim Crowed in the United States of America, Malcolm noted. They would be right at home in Harlem from Cairo, where a case of dysentery left him incapacitated for 3 days in his hotel room, just like Pat has been many a times. Malcolm traveled to Saudi Arabia. The warm treatment he received from both light and dark-skinned people in Saudi Arabia proved to be transformative. There is no color prejudice among Muslims, he wrote in a column published by the Pittsburgh Courier. For Islam teaches that all mortals are equal and brothers. Malcolm reported back to the black press that Arabs and Africans were more concerned about the civil rights struggle in the United States than their own status right here in Africa. Malcolm used personal reporters to build and promote a pan-African solidarity between black Americans and the Middle East. So, look, whiteness is a social construct, like we've talked about many times. Just because a social construct, isn't real or whatever, does not mean that there are not material consequences, right, for those social constructs. Kind of like, race isn't real, but racism is absolutely real, and the effects of racism are absolutely real. And racism, right, and race is going to look different based on different material circumstances, based on like the level of colonization, the level of cultural exchange that goes on between like Africa and not the Middle East, but I refer to it more as Western Asia because that's more geographically accurate, right? But there's a level of cultural exchange in terms of like whiteness and otherness, right? Shout out Grom. I think that for this time, maybe because like Saudi Arabia has yet to be like the kind of economic powerhouse that like we look at it today, and a lot of like the other like OPEC nations, right? This is still at that time where, if you recall, when we were reading Jason Hickel talking about like the decolonial movements, right? This is the height of that time. It's a great period of this is a great period of transition during that time. Sorry, there's a lot going on in chat right now. There's this during that period of transition where I think that you're going to see a lot of social stability and social structures either start to grow or be implemented in terms of whiteness and things of that nature. Because
Dave,
there's definitely a problem now. And thank you,
you
David.
too much subscription to Tier 1. Just a deeply treasured friend of the stream, Dave.
Is this because Marcus was going over Amilcar Cabral? Is that what's got you Portugaled out today, right now, David? We should at some point. We should definitely cover something.
You should have
about
Dave. Dave, yeah, you should come on depending on what happens this week. Maybe we should bring Dave on to just do like a Portugal lesson. Do you feel qualified to do that, Dave?
Yeah.
One of these Fridays to come on and school me on some Portugal that I don't know about.
Yeah, tell us about like the revolution in Portugal. I think it was like during the 70s.
Portugal 24/7. Yeah, that would be awesome. I would actually love that. So Dave, get with us on that. We might have something in the works for this Friday, but if not this Friday, soon. So we'll get with you about that. Work that in the back.
Yeah, and for everybody else in chat, please, if there's something that you want to come on here, right? Especially if you're a fellow like streamer that likes to do like educational leftist content, right? Hit us up. We're more than open to having people come on Fridays. All right.
Yeah. So I know so Johnny just made a very eloquent spoke very eloquently of the dynamic of whiteness and racial constructs and the things that we're seeing develop in history around this time that we're studying. But to bring that into like more of like the micro perspective as it relates to Malcolm X, you see the first kind of like changes in his mindset a little bit, where before he was kind of like an ardently anti-white separatist. And I struggled. I don't use the word racist in terms of anti-whiteness, especially from like a subjugated peoples. I'm just trying to think of a better word for his. I think he had a more of like a blanket denunciation of whiteness in his rhetoric and in his personal beliefs up into this time. But I think now you can start to see it, and through his quotations that we have here, there's a little bit more of his thing where he's like, I'm encountering light-skinned people that are of the same mindset of me. They have the same religion as me, and they have the same cultural values as me. And he makes several interesting quotes here regarding skin color and beliefs. And I think you start to see a little bit of a change in his mindset that was, forged in the crucible of racial persecution, which led him to have an extremely justified view of white people being, the devil, for lack of a better term.
Well, I mean, because I think like in terms of like the way the caste system in the U.S. is set up, kind of like harkening back to what we were talking about when we were going over the revolution or the counter-revolution of 1776 by Gerald Horne, right? Yeah, they kind of are that like even at like the poorest white man so far in Malcolm X's life, right? Has been his like opponent towards dignity, towards citizenship, towards not even just like equality, but just like just having a life, right? So when he goes and experiences this,
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't really.
You're good. So like even like when he goes over to this other country, this whole other world that never had that construction of that racial caste system that was set up in the U.S., it's gonna blow his fucking mind that like, oh, there's like basically like white Muslims, there's like white Arabs and shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And Sin Chow, blue-eyed devil is the correct classification for Joe Biden.
Yes.
You should not be ashamed of, or you should not think twice about that distinction for him.
Yes, and every person that will be affected by what's going on in East Palestine in Ohio, that blood is on his hands. It's on every person that helped break the rail strike a couple months ago or a month ago. I don't know. Time is also a social construct.
Time's a flat circle.
Yeah, time's a flat circle. And we are living in hell. The abyss is not only staring at us, it is just nuzzling us with its gnarly gnashing teeth, ready to rip us to shreds. So yeah.
Okay. Well, there's a nice picture if you move the slide forward.
Oh.
You can all just enjoy Malcolm X in Egypt. And I made sure that this was from his trip in 1959, because there's also other trips. This is a accurate picture for the time period that we're reading about. I just want everybody to know that.
He made more than one trip?
To the Middle East, yeah.
I did not know that. Yeah, this is before there was a McDonald's, like, just off just off to the side.
Yeah, this is before Guatemala City had the biggest Taco Bell in the world. Is this your turn? Or my turn? This is
I have no idea.
You did. I did the first.
What did we just do? We just did this. Malcolm Car. Yeah, no, this is yours.
In Sudan, from Khartoum's Grand Hotel, Malcolm reveled in the role of the radical statesman, praising intelligent Africans who questioned why millions of blacks lived without freedom, without public school rights, only to be relegated to slums, ghettos, and other social imprisonment. In America, a nation that touted its democracy all over the world, he accepted the gracious hospitality of local officials during his 11-day stay in Khartoum. The prominence of dark-skinned officials, such as Egypt's Sadat, impressed Malcolm, who came to better understand the nuances of racial identity outside of America. He discovered that light-skinned politicians in the Middle East could be just as radical as their darker-skinned counterparts. Tours of Cairo, Saudi Arabia, and Sudan convinced him that Africa is the new world, in whose bright future Negroes are destined to play a key role. Malcolm's trip drew him closer to the world of countries battling for political autonomy outside of Western domination. His wish to feel the pulse as many of the African masses as possible before returning home made him an eager student and careful observer. As he surveyed the breadth of U.S. global influence, Malcolm dared Americans to confront racial injustice back home. Africans, Malcolm wrote from Sudan, are asking why so many American Negroes suffer unemployment, bad housing, slum conditions, and poverty. He sought to wield the power of international opinion as a sword in the struggle for racial justice. Here in Africa, the all-seeing eye of the African masses is upon America, he included. So this is So this is like an interesting development here where Malcolm X is now visiting other countries and is witnessing what life can be like for black individuals in terms of their ability to organize politically, organize societies, have their own communities that aren't segregated or occupied. And it's very inspiring to him. And then in addition to that, you see him like um, offering even like an international indictment of the situation in the United States. Like, you treat Africa like it is a backwards and uncivilized society, but they're over here pointing the finger and saying, what is going on in America? How do these people not have right to public school? How do these people not have the right to these basic things? So they're castigating the United States for their regressive policies that they don't even have citizens of theirs in public school.
Right.
Or an equitable public school, I should say.
On to the next one.
Sure.
Oh, look at this. I was impressed by the Muslims of Sudan. Their religious piety and hospitality are unmatched anywhere. Really felt in heaven and home here.
Yeah, Malcolm X, very psyched on Sudan.
Oh, yeah.
Man, the history of Sudan would be interesting. I'm pretty sure there's been quite a bit of like political issues there that I believe the United States had a hand in. If I'm recalling if my memory copy of Killing Hope is accurate, let me take a look here. Sudan.
Maybe we should just get like an emote of the copy of like Killing Hope, like as an emote, or is this like tap tap tap?
Yeah. All right, let's just go ahead. I can't get too deeply into this right now.
No, you're good.
All right, go ahead.
Malcolm returned to New York City on Wednesday, July 22nd, 1959, a few days after the airing of The Hate That Hate Produced, a nationally broadcast 5-part documentary series that turned the Nation of Islam into a genuine phenomenon. The documentary was the brainchild of Louis Lomax, one of Malcolm's favorite reporters, a savvy journalist who refused to let a 5-year prison stint derail his professional ambitions. Lomax parlayed his inside access with the Nation into a documentary hosted by local journalist Mike Wallace, who would make his name from the controversy generated by the film. The Hate That Hate Produced premiered over 5 consecutive nights, but it was such an immediate sensation that CBS rebroadcast it as a 1-hour special the day Malcolm returned from Africa. Wallace breathlessly narrated footage of the messenger and Malcolm speaking to thousands of followers in Washington, D.C. I assume he means by the messenger Elijah Muhammad, right?
The messenger is Elijah Muhammad,
okay.
Correct.
Here you see their minister, Malcolm X, displaying 5 of the biggest Negro papers in America, observed Wallace. Papers published in Los Angeles, New York, Pittsburgh, Detroit, and Newark, fucking New Jersey. And Negro politicians, regardless of their private beliefs, respectfully listen when the leaders of the black supremacy movement speak. A one-sided indictment of the group designed to scare white liberals, outrage conservatives, and shame the civil rights establishment. The documentary had the unintended consequence of turning Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad into folk heroes with the black community. Nonetheless, mainstream media and civil rights leaders would repeat the film's characterization of the Nation as black supremacists, preaching racial hatred. 6 weeks later, Martin Luther King Jr. followed suit, describing the NOI as advocates of black supremacy.
Yeah, so this documentary, The Hate That Hate Produced, if you move forward one slide, you can watch the whole thing on YouTube if you want. I didn't have enough time to go through this entire thing, but I did this is the first part of it. The quality of it is absolutely dog shit, for at least for this clip. I apologize, but you're gonna get the gist of it.
I'm hoping that this doesn't get DCMA'd or whatever, DMCA'd by YouTube when we upload it. By the way, the YouTube should now be accurate, should have the most recent episodes up there. Had to do a lot of like cutting of certain parts of episodes and stuff like that because otherwise like nobody can watch it. So I don't know what got cut. If you're watching this on YouTube later, I understand that it's very difficult to try and make it to our live shows, but this is the best way to get it, or just check it out if it's recent enough on the VODs on Twitch.
Here on Channel 13, we presented a 5-part series which we called The Hate That Hate Produced, a study of the rise of black racism, of a call for black supremacy among a small but growing segment of the American Negro population. And tonight, because of the considerable interest evoked by the serialized version, we are repeating this disturbing story with additional film sequences which we did not have time to use last week. And then, after the documentary portion of the program, Dr. Anna Hedgeman, former administrative assistant to Mayor Robert Wagner, Arnold Forster of the Anti-Defamation League, Jackie Robinson, former Brooklyn Dodger star and now columnist for the New York Post, Roy Wilkins, executive secretary of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and the Reverend Dr. Gardner Taylor, president of the Protestant Council of Greater New York. 5 people with a particular and immediate interest in race relations will talk about what can be done about the tide of racism among this segment of the Negro population. So now, the hate that hate produced. While city officials, state agencies, white liberals, and sober-minded Negroes stand idly by, a group of Negro dissenters is taking to street corner step ladders, church pulpits, sports arenas, and ballroom platforms across the United States to preach a gospel of hate that would set off a federal investigation if it were preached by Southern whites. What are they saying? Listen.
I charge the white man with being the greatest liar on earth. I charge the white man with being the greatest drunkard on earth. I charge the white man with being the greatest swine eater on earth, yet the Bible forbids it. I charge the white man with being the greatest gambler on earth. I charge the white man, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, with being the greatest murderer on earth. I charge the white man with being the greatest peace breaker on earth. I charge the white man with being the greatest adulterer on earth. I charge the white man with being the greatest robber on earth. I charge the white man with being the greatest deceiver on earth. I charge the white man with being the greatest troublemaker on earth. So therefore, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I ask you, bring back a verdict of guilty as charged.
The indictment you have just heard is being delivered over and over again in most of the major cities across the country. This charge comes at the climax of a morality play called The Trial. The plot, indeed the message of the play, is that the white man has been put on trial for his sins against the black man. He has been found guilty. The sentence is death. The play is sponsored, produced by a Negro religious group who call themselves the Muslims. They use a good deal of the paraphernalia of the traditional religion of Islam, but they are fervently disavowed by Orthodox Muslims. These homegrown Negro American Muslims are the most powerful of the black supremacist groups. They now claim a membership of at least 250,000 Negroes. Their doctrine is being taught in 50 cities across the nation. Let no one underestimate the Muslims. They have their own parochial schools.
That would be such a great little
like
clip.
This one in Chicago,
Let no one
where
underestimate
Muslim
Muslims.
children are taught to hate the white man. Even the clothes they wear are in sharp contrast to American dress, like these 2 Negro children going to school. Wherever they go, the Muslims withdraw from the life of the community. They have their own stores, supermarkets, barbershops, restaurants. Here you see a progressive, modern, air-conditioned Muslim department store on Chicago's
Wait,
south
can I pause
side.
it real quick?
Their story of hatred for the white man is carried.
So I don't know like what the history of like Hasidic communities are, at this point in America, but like, it's the same shit.
Right.
And honestly, like, it's not as if like, a lot of that hostility to Gentile people, isn't fucking there also. So like, what's the big fucking deal?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely. I mean, at this time, I mean, it is certainly relevant that this is becoming popular with the black segments of society, and is also adopting a radical undertone in terms of separation and community protection. Thus, PBS or whatever this is has to like construct an extremely powerful scare tactic to be disseminated into white communities about this like militant organization of religious fanatics to but as it said in the book text, it had the unintended consequence of turning Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad into like national superstars.
I mean, like the funniest part about it is like right now there are like Hasidic communities with like their own police.
Right.
So I don't know, and I'm not trying to make any kind of like weird argument here, but I don't know. It's something that like immediately like my brain went to. It's like, oh, so it's like a Hasidic community. Like we have them all over the place.
Yeah, I don't know.
In many Negro newspapers. Here you see their minister Malcolm X proudly displaying 5 of the biggest Negro papers in America. Papers published in Los Angeles, New York, Pittsburgh, Detroit, and Newark. Negro politicians, regardless of their private beliefs, listen when the leaders of the black supremacist movement speak. Here you see Manhattan Borough President Hewlin Jack shaking hands with Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the Muslims. And here is City Councilman Earl Brown addressing a Muslim rally. 4 or 5 times a year, the Muslims assemble in one of America's major cities to hear their leader, Elijah Muhammad. This coming Sunday afternoon, they will gather at New York's St. Nicholas Arena to hear him. But here, you see them arriving at Washington's Uline Arena for a meeting they held just 6 weeks ago. Every devout Muslim is eager to attend these meetings. For some time between now and 1970, and at just such a rally as this, the Muslim leader has intimated that he will give the call for the destruction of the white man. As you will see, every precaution is taken to protect their leader at these meetings. The Muslims, both men and women, submit themselves to a complete search before they finally enter the meeting hall. Some 10,000 persons attended the rally that you see here. All of them were searched. That's a search going on here. This process began 3 hours before the meeting started.
That's a practice that probably comes in handy later. That
And not only that, I mean, this is like a community of people who like any effort of like black organization, self-determination is being violently, these are people that are having their houses firebombed. There's regular assassination attempts. There's regular vandalism. I mean, it's not to say that these communities were not without conditions that would
necessitate
such procedures.
And shortly, you will see Elijah Muhammad, founder and spiritual leader of the group. His flock is waiting for him now. And finally, here comes their spiritual leader, Elijah Muhammad. He's actually Elijah Poole of Hawkinsville, Georgia. During World War II, Muhammad was arrested and charged with sedition and draft dodging. The Department of Justice finally dropped the charge that he had advocated defeat of the white democracies and victory for the colored Japanese. But Muhammad and his followers did serve time in the federal penitentiary for refusing to register for the draft. Here you will hear Elijah Muhammad introduced by Minister Malcolm X, the Muslims' New York leader and ambassador at large for the movement. The good news that Minister X talks about here is the coming rise of the black man and the fall of the white man.
Everyone who is here today realizes that we are now living in the fulfillment of prophecy. Right. We have come to hear and to see the greatest and the wisest and most fearless black man in America today. Right. In the church, we used to sing the song, "Good news, the chariot is coming." Is that right or wrong? But what we must bear in mind, that what's good news to one person is bad news to another. While you sit here today, knowing that you have come to hear good news, you must realize in advance what's good news for you might be bad news for somebody else. What's good news for the sheep might be bad news to the wolf.
The good news for the black man is that he is on the verge of recapturing his position as ruler of the universe. The bad news for the white man is that his long and wicked reign will shortly be over. And following this introduction,
Inshallah.
Elijah Muhammad, leader of the Muslims, speaks.
The Christian religion has failed you. Your leaders of that religion has failed you. Now the government of America has failed you. You have no justice coming from no one. Right. Whereas it is written, like sheep among wolves. Every wolf taken up by it. You want justice. You want freedom. You want equality. But get none.
This guy didn't stand a
Following
chance.
this speech, which
to
lasted some
Like,
2
no
hours,
wonder,
Newsbeat reporter
No.
Louis Lomax interviewed Elijah Muhammad, the spiritual leader of the Muslims.
Although you have said that the white race is doomed and that they are a race of devils, do you make any distinction? Are there any good white people? For example, suppose I were to ask you who you think is the best white man. Is there any such thing? Let the Bible.
I was actually kind of hoping that.
I can't. So just a little foreshadowing. Malcolm X does make a declaration of his favorite white person later in this chapter. Stay tuned for this exciting revelation. Everybody, put your predictions in the chat of who Malcolm X's favorite white man is, and in the next probably 10 to 20 slides, we will reveal the answer of Malcolm X's favorite white person. But as we were saying, so that was the hate that hate produced. Being that the hate being the Nation of Islam and their hate of the white man, but it was produced by the hate of, Jim Crow America and many other factors. And you can see how that was kind of put together and how Malcolm X was showcased in it. And this is, this chapter is called The World Stage. And what we're seeing is Malcolm X is not only traveling the world, but is now being thrust into like the world stage of the civil rights movement. And I was saying this before, I didn't want to talk over the thing, but like you can really see why Malcolm X was like completely outshining Elijah Muhammad himself, even within the confines of the Nation of Islam and on the world stage, because just as like the man's presence and his rhetoric and his ability to be an orator is just so compelling that listening to him, it's been such a treat to go over this book and for me to actually go through so many of these speeches, because Malcolm X going through those speeches has just been delightful.
Yeah, no, I'm like starting to wonder like how the hell did Elijah Muhammad even have as many followers as he did, because like he doesn't come across as very like charismatic at all. You know what I mean?
Maybe we just didn't get the good stuff. I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe that stuff just didn't, survive into the historical record. And by the way, Frankster, I noticed your little emoji of Joey Steele. He technically, I don't think, would have been considered white at the time. He would have been considered an Asiatic Slav. I don't think that Joey Steele would have gotten the white pass yet. I almost said Mao. I mean, like, technically, Elijah Muhammad, he supported the Japanese. So I wonder what his thoughts were on the Chinese, considering
I don't know how much.
No, I know.
I don't know how much they actually supported him, as not as just using support of the Japanese as a way to get them out of the draft.
Yeah.
I would hope that they didn't have any sincere promotion of Imperial Japan. But then again, because I don't know if you know this, but I think it was in like 1912 or something like that. No, it must have been longer. It must have been before that more. Maybe it was 1912. There was a war, the Russo-Japanese
Yes.
war, and it was the first time in history that like a quote unquote white or European power lost to a non-white one. It was like huge. Like there was even people in India that were like they didn't knew very little about world politics or geopolitics or imperial Japan or anything like that. All they knew was that a European country lost a war to an Asian country. So like
Right.
in India, there was like large swaths of people that were like, hell yeah, Japan. Japan is the best place because they beat the Russians.
Shit. So is this you or me?
But that's a tangent, little tangent there. I think this is me. You read the last one that the hate produced. Yeah, so this one's
Yeah.
me. So Martin Luther King Jr. confronted the controversy directly during an August 20th speech. The controversy meaning the controversy of the documentary, The Hate That Hate Produced. Confronted the controversy directly during an August 20th speech at the National Bar Association in Milwaukee. A week earlier, he had sent a telegram to President Eisenhower unsuccessfully urging him to issue a proclamation in support of school integration ahead of Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev's visit to the United States. In Milwaukee, King proclaimed that Eisenhower was on the wrong side of history's sweeping momentum for racial justice, characterizing the White House as too silent and apathetic in the midst of an epic freedom movement. I fear the future historians will have to record that when America came to its most progressive moment of creative fulfillment in the area of human relations, said King, it was temporarily held back by a chief executive who refused to make a strong positive statement morally condemning segregation. King condemned both political parties in his speech, accusing Southern racists and right wing Northerners of unleashing toxic anti democratic energies into the Democratic and Republican parties. King mockingly praised segregationists as Mississippi Senator James Eastland because he airs his vicious prejudice all the time. Almost kind of a reminiscent of Malcolm X. I don't mean to cut it off here, but Malcolm X's yeah, his indictment of the white liberal and how
Yeah.
he doesn't trust them because it's like a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
Dr. King making a very similar assessment right here that he maybe favors the segregationists out of Mississippi because at least they air the vicious prejudice all the time, unlike the white liberals who conceal their more racist elements as allies. Just a little funny thing to put out there. In contrast with politicians who pretended to support black citizenship during election time, only to abandon black folk and democracy itself once in office. Near the end of the speech, without explicitly mentioning Malcolm X and the nation, King decried the rise of black hate groups. Black supremacy is as bad as white supremacy, he proclaimed, providing a phrase that continued the simple analogy between the Klan and black Muslims. This allegation overwhelmed his pungent criticisms of the Eisenhower administration, the Washington political establishment, and the American democratic culture. King had misinterpreted Malcolm's call for radical black dignity as simply the continuation of racial oppression, with black folk assuming the negative role historically adopted by whites. What King referred to as black supremacy, Malcolm defined as radical political self-determination, an affirming act that acknowledged the humanity long denied African Americans.
So like,
Go ahead.
is he just like listening to what other people's responses or takes are on like what they're doing, or is he actually like engaging with like the material or like whatever statements that they're making themselves? Because it's just like I don't know. It just
Yeah,
seems kind of weird.
Martin
You know what
Luther
I mean?
King.
Yeah.
I feel like Martin Luther King had his thumb. I think he had his finger on the pulse of the whole civil rights thing. I mean, he obviously had his beliefs, and his belief was in integration and nonviolence. So, I mean, it makes sense that he would not be, in agreement with what they were doing. And he was not a separationist. He was an integrationist. So, I could see why he would kind of place those on similar things. Even though that I would probably be a little bit more sympathetic to Malcolm. And again, you have two very different people who had two very different upbringings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
While Martin Luther King was faced with quite an extensive amount of racial prejudice growing up, he
Absolutely.
grew up as a black bourgeois with a rich father who traveled the world, and they were religious, and he got to do, summers, vacations, and all these things. Meanwhile, Malcolm X was getting his house firebombed and his father murdered. You know, so to have this extremely defensive, isolationist approach to how he was going to achieve his own self-determination or the self-determination of his people is, in my opinion, extremely justifiable. And the fact that both of these men would be murdered, speaks a little bit more to Malcolm's trepidation of appeasement.
So what you're saying is there's a stratification of class going on here that is influencing not even just like
Class element, yeah.
the analyses of Malcolm X versus MLK, but also like the people that are supporting them. Like you see like that like in Malcolm's personal experience, white people firebombed his house and probably murdered his dad, right? Or definitely did. MLK, however, right, he's got like his buddies that he played, pool with, back at like seminary school and shit, and it's like, yeah, some of them are all right, yeah. So it's just kind of like,
they didn't really talk a lot about the racial situations that Malcolm may have experienced while in prison, but who knows what happened the years he spent in Massachusetts State Prison. I mean, even to this day, prisons in America are segregated in one way or another and are wrought with interracial violence. I imagine back in the 1950s and early just the 1950s, this was probably an extremely who knows what that did to his outlooks as well, having to survive in a prison system as well. I'm sure that was all very traumatic and influential.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Also, one more thing here.
What's up?
Go back. I just want to talk about the Khrushchev thing as well. So I think what King is trying to say there, and I think he's trying to say, like, how are you going to have Nikita Khrushchev come here? And meanwhile, we have all of, I think King is making an optic suggestion to the United States.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because it's like, how are you going to have, the Soviet Union, the boogeyman, this Cold War situation where, everyone's pointing the finger at them and saying about how, unfair their society is, or how, totalitarian their society is. Well, whatever accusations may be hurled at them, how can you throw these stones when you live in this glass house of segregationist oppression?
Right.
How can you say that while you sit atop this house of cards of caste and racism,
this throne of lies,
throne of lies. So I think what Martin is saying there is like, I think it's a little bit of a passive aggressive read between the lies way of like, man, I really fear that historians will have to record what America came to as the most progressive. I think he's kind of saying like, making a optical suggestion there to like, you might not, because this is something that the Soviet Union used against, for propaganda against the United States for most of its existence. That, you know what I mean? There's such disgusting racial disparity within the country of the United States.
I mean, there's even like a history of like, black people from America moving to the Soviet Union because of how bad it was here.
Right. And when we read that quote of Malcolm X in Sudan, where he says like, here in Sudan, I feel like this, I feel like I'm in heaven. Do you know what that reminded me of?
Harry Haywood.
No, it reminded me of Paul.
Oh, right,
Robeson,
right.
Being in the Soviet Union. For the first time in my life, I walk with full dignity. For the first time in my life, for the first time in this man's entire life, an international superstar, he states that for the first time in his entire life, he walks as a man with full dignity in the Soviet Union. Not even among other black people, really, just among a place where he didn't feel like judged and persecuted just for his complexion.
I mean, it's funny how literally every single black person that visits the Soviet Union, especially during this time, like they go there and it's just like, I love it here.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to be I would say that the only argument to that would be is that a lot of the black people that went there might have had some level of celebrity. So like, you know what I mean? Like when Paul Robeson goes there, obviously he's like an extremely renowned theater singer and actor. So you know what I mean? Like obviously, his experience of the Soviet Union might be very different than just like an average person's, because he's like, heralded and praised as this person. But I take the words of Paul Robeson very sincerely, and I do believe that there was, a deep societal element to the things he was feeling there, that it wasn't just simply praise. Because he talks about like people on the bus and people at the bus stop and things like that. He talks about just the way that his ordinary people react with him. and I trust his intuition in that
Yeah.
situation. You know what I mean?
I trust Paul Robeson. I trust Harry Haywood. Right.
Go on the record here and say we trust Paul Robeson.
Yeah,
right?
I feel like it's not too
On record.
radical.
Subversive history is on record.
You know,
trust Paul Robeson.
But it's just it's kind of funny how like there isn't really too many, or if any, that I've been exposed to, where it's just like, yeah, no, I visited the Soviet Union and everybody there was, you know, fucking, you know, asshole. Everyone's there just as bigoted as, you know, your average American. I have yet to see an account of that. So it really does, to me, you know, kind of make me feel like, you know, something was just socially different for that period of time, right, in the Soviet Union, because it's just like, you know, there isn't like, you know, a large population of black or African people within the Soviet Union at the time. There's every reason for them to be like, you know, mildly xenophobic, right?
Well,
you know, it's not as if there wasn't that prior to the revolution. So it does tell me that there was something going on there socially, where it's just like, you know, it's they're being judged upon like, you know, the content of their character.
And I would also call a little bit of call my own anecdotal evidence into play here. My visits to Cuba, I stayed in Havana.
Right.
I visited and stayed in Havana twice on 2 separate trips.
Right.
As well as a couple other places on the island. And I live in Philadelphia, and I've frequented a couple other American cities. And to this day, American cities have like deeply segregated. American cities are still segregated to this day. You know what I mean? Informally segregated in a way. You know what I'm saying? Not by like a specific law, but by a structure. And one thing I did notice that during my time, and this is completely anecdotal, and I didn't scour the whole island or anything like that, but while there's poverty in Cuba, that is no question. Cuba is not a rich country, but within Havana, from my anecdotal observation, there is no like black hood. You know what I mean? Like there is no like, oh, that's the bad part of town over there, and that's where the black people live.
So there's no racialized poverty.
Not that I noticed. No,
where there's like a segregated.
And obviously, for anyone that doesn't know, there's a large Afro-Cuban population in Cuba. Like, people that we would consider black by any consideration, by any metric of observation. And there's no like, oh, here's old Havana, and here's central Havana where it's all very nice, and this is where all the white people live, and then over there's the outskirts with all the hovels where the black people live. It's not like that there. I'm sure there's still degrees, some amount of like interpersonal racism. Like, that's not something that just gets extinguished from society. But in terms of like the structural elements, it is not as apparent, or it's not as apparent as you see in any other American city that I've been to.
There he was, chat, in the Escambray. So I think, is this me or you?
Well, go for it. We just
right.
So, as you all know, in the spirit of the debate bro culture, we decided to bring up, this is a Malcolm X debating Bayard Rustin. If you were here for our last stream, you know that we went over Bayard Rustin.
Briefly.
Who is what?
I said briefly. We went a little into him.
Briefly. Well, we watched the video. If you're committed to video content, you know what I mean? That's a relevant portion of the stream where we went over Bayard Rustin, and he was a organizer, civil rights organizer, maybe lesser explored than other civil rights icons. He was a homosexual. He was a socialist. Apparently he progressed into a little bit of a maybe less savory belief system. But this chapter brings up that Malcolm X would engage regularly with like those that orbited Dr. King, but never directly debated Dr. King. So here's a clip of him debating Bayard Rustin, who was a close organizer and confidant of Dr. King. And this kind of like shows like a little bit of like the difference in perspectives kind of like laid bare in like this direct confrontation. It's 16 minutes long.
One of the signs that manifest the wrath of God today against America and against the white world, period, is the upset in nature Everything that America tries to do today, wherein once you were successful in all of your efforts, all of your endeavors were successful. Anything that Uncle Sam put his hand on turned to gold. Everyone bowed to Uncle Sam. Everyone respected Uncle Sam. But not because I say so, but for facts. Today, the shoe is on the other foot. The whole world is turning its back on Uncle Sam. The whole world is looking down on Uncle Sam. The whole world looks at Uncle Sam with contempt and with increasing hatred. Why? Because Uncle Sam is the earth's leading hypocrite. The number one hypocrite on this earth is Uncle Sam.
He sent a hate bus to meet him. This man then goes on to promise in the same interview that when he becomes president in 1972, he will put all Jews in the gas chamber. Now, my friends, I know Malcolm X. He is no fascist. I am merely pointing out that if you do not have an adequate program, and if you do not rely upon the progressive allies, you throw yourself open to being utilized by these people who have no interest in what we are doing. The Muslim movement basically fails to see the real problem. The problem can never be stated in terms of black and white. I am here to tell you in a showdown I will stand with Jim Peck sooner than I will stand with many Negroes I know. This democratization and socialization the Negro cannot do alone. He can contribute greatly toward it. He can contribute vastly toward it. And any movement which begins by blocking out the active cooperation of the best minds, many of which are white as well as black, as to the nature of the new society we need to have here, the process of socialization which we need to have here, is unrealistic and fighting a losing battle. For the Freedom Rides created a situation in which Kennedy then had to act through his brother, because to fail to do so would create so much confusion that something had to be done. The problem is, how do Negroes and their friends make the institutions which exist impossible to exist? The way in which the segregation was done away in the Woolworth and other stores in the South was by people sitting and saying, either you will have no places to eat, or they will be integrated. When we did that, they were integrated. Furthermore, I maintain
I'm kind of spitting here, I gotta
that
say.
even if it were possible to bring any degree of progress now,
Yeah, this is Rustin.
it is going to be because as we follow this form of mass action and strategic nonviolence, we will not only put pressure on the government, but we will put pressure on other groups which ought by their nature to be allied with us. And they will have to stand up and be counted in their own interest.
Spokesman for white people. White people are too intelligent for that. Well, we today are waking up to, and there's no so-called Negro married to a white woman that can stand up and say that he speaks for the black masses. Maybe he can speak for the bourgeois, the bourgeoisie. But as Dr. Rustin pointed out, he doesn't speak for the black masses.
Got him.
Then there are rich black people. Please. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad says that if you try and keep us here against our will and enforce segregation upon us, you're going to have violence throughout the country. You're going to have it whether you like it or not. And when I say Kennedy, I mean John F. Kennedy. The man who promised all the American so-called Negroes who vote what he was going to do for them when he got in office, and has yet to do the first thing that he promised, but has paid off the Negro leadership so that they are silent and say nothing about the promises that he originally made to get Negroes to vote for him. Now, I would like to point out another point before we go any farther. We who are followers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad do not make a choice between integration and segregation. Segregation doesn't enter into the picture at all. We are for separation, not segregation. Segregation, as we're taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, is that which is forced upon inferiors by superiors. Separation is done voluntarily by two equals. When you find an all-white school, they don't call it a segregated school, they call it a separate school. When you find an all-Negro school, they call it a segregated school, because it was set up by the white man. If it was an all-black school that had been set up by the black man himself, run by the black man himself, with the curricula that they follow, put in the school by the black man himself, they would call it a separate school. And it would be just as independent and on equal basis with the white school. People who are defenseless, who are harmless, and because of your indoctrination and brainwashing, brainless, senseless, have no intellect whatsoever of their own where they can think for themselves. And it is because America has taken millions of black people from the East, from their own culture, from their own civilization, and brought them here and stripped them and brought them down to the level of an animal, and then turned around and taught them that they were savages in the jungle, cannibals eating people. When they were caught and brought here, this is supposed to justify the American white man's treatment of these people. It's like taking a horse, putting him in a cage, tying him up, and putting another horse on the outside, and then tell everybody the horse that's in the cage can't run as fast as the one on the outside. And this is what you have done to the American Negro. You have brought us here and stripped us of everything we once had. You've stripped us of our culture, you've stripped us of our language, you've stripped us of our God, our religion, our background. You've cut off our roots, all ties that we once had with our own kind in the East. And after stripping us of our roots and destroying us as a people, making us become dead as a people, mentally and otherwise, then you point the finger of scorn at us and tell the world that we're not ready for freedom, that we're not qualified for freedom.
It's funny. So when I was getting my degree in education, one of the things that, I looked at was, looking back on it now, it's kind of problematic, but La Raza. But the other big one, probably more well known, is Amistad schools. Have you ever heard of those?
You said Amistad schools?
Yeah.
Amistad was a slave ship.
Yes. It was like a program meant for
mutiny slave ship.
Yes.
It was named after the Amistad slave revolt.
I believe so. Okay. But I was more so interested in how the program was set up, right? And it was like an education program where it was focused on black culture. It had predominantly or nominally black educators in the room, right? That were from the communities that the children were being taught in and stuff, and it had amazing effects. The kids did quite well, and yeah, it sounds like CRT because it kind of is. But this isn't but this isn't for law. This is just I think it was primary education or secondary education. It was for children, but they did really good, when they were taught and Black history was a part of everyday curriculum, right? It made them feel good about themselves, and it made them feel positive about doing stuff like that. That shit got shut down.
I have a really good friend of mine from martial arts training.
Yeah.
And he gave me a really interesting perspective that I never heard about before. So he's my same age almost exactly. I think we're born within a year of one another, right?
Right.
And he always he's into he's a martial arts guy. He's into a lot of he's into a lot of media stuff, and he was always posting about Spawn and Blade, as a martial arts guy, kind of and talking to him, I didn't realize that growing up in the 90s, maybe when a lot of other communities or white communities were able to look up to all these superheroes and lead characters and things like that. Meanwhile, you know what I mean? As a younger black kid, he's getting wrapped up with Spawn and Blade. And Spawn and Blade are both awesome, but they're kind of anti-heroes. I don't know if you ever watched the movie Spawn, but but it's
Yeah, I'm from
the
the 90s. I know Spawn.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? And it was just interesting for him to break down that that's kind of like all he had in terms of like, relation to like a mainstream like superhero of sorts.
I mean, that depends, like, what the history of your people are, depending on who they are. Like, look, I make it a point to say that I'm Anglo-Indian, because, like, I don't really have a whole lot of connection to, like, the more Indian side of, like, my family's culture. And even then, right, it's going to be like, the cultures that, like, kind of cozied up to
Right, yeah.
the colonizer more than, like, of their own. You know what I mean? And it really depends. It's not as if, like, every culture, every people is like a monolith. You know what I mean? Like, even when we look at, like,
Especially not from a place like India.
right. And even if we look at, like, trying to think, like, what would be like a good example that's not going to get me dragged for months on Twitter. Um, I guess we could say, like, the 5 civilized tribes that, sided with, like, the U.S. and helped the U.S. fight against, like, other, like, indigenous nations right here in the U.S. They adopted, like, every, thing that the U.S. told them to do, and, like, fought with them against other, like, resistors of U.S. colonialism. And what do they get for it? Nothing.
Yep. Yep. They tried to every barrier that was set in front of them in terms of being like, okay, so like you need this religion, you need to act like this, you need
Right.
to speak this language.
You need to farm like this.
Exactly. And this is what happened in South America also. And this is why they changed that encomienda system. I believe it's in encomienda system where they could pretty much enslave anyone that wasn't a believer in Catholicism, because then, after some amount of years, the indigenous communities are like, yeah, sure, we're down with Catholicism. We can speak English. And then it's like, wait a minute. You mean we can't enslave you on this basis anymore because you're all just kind of like, integrating in the way that we said you should have. And now we have to set up like a different way to put you in the out group so we can enslave you essentially.
New rule.
Yeah. Hold on, God's talking to me.
It's like Bill Mayer, like, new rule.
Yeah, exactly. We can turn it. Do you want to keep watching this one, or do you want to move forward? Or
I'll post it in chat, and then we'll go on to the next slide.
I didn't want to, but you just kind of saw that, like, you really saw the two sides laid bare there. You know what I mean? As they were kind of going at each other, you kind of saw Bayard Rustin really representing the MLK side of things, and then Malcolm obviously retorted in his scathing fashion. And I think both were
good.
I think both were also compelling. I think when Bayard was talking, I was like, okay, yeah, I see what this guy's saying. But then Malcolm kind of just came in and dropped the hammer on him, and I was like, I don't know, Bayard.
He's got a point, Bayard. Like, it's.
He does have a point.
Thank you for the follow, comrade. Clever name. And I'm sorry, I don't even think I ever even mentioned this, but thank you again for resubscribing for 1 month at tier 1. Frankster says,
Didn't even see that. Thank you. Wait, was there someone else or just Frankster?
I think before that it was David. We got David. David knows we acknowledged him.
Frankster, thank you so much. One of the funniest people in chat.
And thank you, Sam, for posting the link in the Discord. I don't even know how you do what you do. You're just so good at this.
Yeah, you're amazing. You're all amazing.
We could not do this without you. I really need you all to know that like we really can't do this without you. Like, this whole thing, right, doesn't fucking work without you guys. So, Malcolm's insistence on black dignity came alive when 4 black students from the historically black school, North Carolina, I want to say AT&T, but I know it's not, A&T, staged a sit-in on February 1st to protest racial segregation at a Woolworth lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina. By peacefully sitting in the area reserved exclusively for white patrons, the students announced themselves as dissidents, whose actions incited shock, controversy, and over time, violence, arrests, and support. The sit-ins swelled over the following months. They started to include white activists, and they moved from North Carolina to other southern states, and then finally to the north, where interracial groups of students organized sympathy demonstrations. With the lunch counter sit-ins, direct confrontation against Jim Crow captured the national imagination. Although he remained skeptical of their steadfast belief in American democracy, Malcolm admired the boldness of the student activists. He alluded to the new Negro, black folk directly challenging white supremacy through demonstrations, pickets, and sit-ins. During a March 10th radio debate with journalist Barry Gray in New York, Malcolm and Gray parried over race, democracy, and social justice during the hour-long program. Malcolm identified himself as a black man despite complexion, noting that his fair skin, red hair, and freckles did not exclude him from a community community he defined by membership in a shared history of oppression. Radicals don't clap our hands and say hooray over the few blacks who've made it, observed Malcolm. Quote, we're thinking of the masses. His critique of American democracy took center stage. He observed that any time to make new bills or pass new bills to give voting privileges or give voting rights to approximately 20 million black people, then you can't just call these people citizens. For Malcolm, citizenship meant dignity, something laws and legislation could not possibly bestow. So basically he's arguing for a cultural revolution.
To a degree, yes.
But
so now we're entering into this this Woolworths situation, where if you're familiar with the history of the civil rights movement, this is the lunch counter sit-ins. You may not know them as like the Woolworth sit-ins or whatever, but like those all those pictures of the black men sitting at the counters, like with their hands crossed, where there's all those like people are pouring mustard on them and shit like that. You've seen those pictures, right?
Yeah.
Well, we're about to see more of those pictures, but yeah. I mean, we're going to look at pretty much all these in the things that I've put in.
Shit. I didn't pre-watch.
Yeah. So just go ahead. You can just go forward.
But I think like the other thing that I just wanted to bring up real quick is that he is acknowledging that he is not as dark-skinned, right? And he is acknowledging that there is like a gradient, I guess, you know, of this racial caste system within the U.S. You know, and I think that's interesting, and I wonder if that's at all influenced by like his trip to the Middle East.
Yeah,
you know,
mean, perhaps. I would say almost certainly, because we could see that this obviously had a profound effect on him, that it made it into his writings, where he made several comments about this. You know, him noticing that maybe this ideology does not begin and end with having a dark skin complexion.
Right.
So this is what we were talking about before at the Woolworths.
Greensboro 4.
What's up, horse?
Yours truly, Joe McNeil. David
Horse.
Richmond.
So good to have
You're
you.
always
Junior
welcome to
Blair,
park here.
And Frank McCain.
Park your
We all
horse.
lived in the same dormitory. I think we were all very young. I was the youngest. I was 17. I reacted to the Jim Crow South with anger. I did not believe for 1 minute that I was a second-class citizen.
Thank
That
you
I
for the
was inferior in
Thank
any
you.
way
sub, horse. Much
to
appreciated.
whites, greens, whatever.
It is an honor.
I couldn't live the lie. We decided to take a stand. Let's go.
2-month streak
Let's
for
do it.
the most famous of horses.
So we purchased small items, sundry items, to establish the fact that we were customers. And then we sat down on a stool and asked for a cup of coffee. And the store manager told us that he wasn't going to serve us. The local establishment grossly underestimated our anger and the ability to hang in there. So when we were leaving the store, the Associated Press was there. And they said, "Hey, boys, what you gonna do?" said, well, we're going to come back, and we're going to keep coming back until you decide to serve us. We started growing. First day 4, the second day probably 16 or 20. It was organic. It's a mind of its own. It kept growing. We decided that whatever actions we were going to take, they were going to be nonviolent. We remained nonviolent. On the third day, it started to get rough.
That is somebody's grandpa.
Yeah.
All right.
Racist grandfather.
Yes, someone out there, right? This is your racist fucking grandpa. Keep that in mind. Like, you know, that dude's 17 and he's like, you know, still walking around and talking, right? So that means that like one of these fucking dickheads is out here walking and talking, you know, probably with a fucking like, you know, MAGA hat on or like, you know, a Trump sticker on the back of his fucking car.
At any time, we could have been carried out of that store in a pine box. We didn't want to be martyrs, but we had to do what we needed to do.
I was a student at Fisk University in Nashville. February 1st, 1960, we heard that 4 young black men sat in at a lunch counter in Greensboro. We had our first sit-in Nashville on February 13th. I'm really amused sometimes because people say, oh, you were so brave. And the truth is, I was afraid the whole time. But the choice was to do what was necessary to end segregation or to tolerate segregation. And that just was not acceptable.
Greensboro became the message. It was like, if they can do it in Greensboro, we too can do it.
Look how mad those ladies are.
And there were young people and people not so young, adults, in major cities outside of the South, participating, sitting in at lunch counters. They were picketing the stores to support the students in the South. And you had people like Martin Luther King Jr. saying things like, by sitting down, we were standing up for the very best in the American tradition.
And I think that's really important for people to know that it was ordinary people, quote unquote ordinary, like themselves, who did everything for the civil rights movement, that it was really a people's movement.
These young people injected something very meaningful, something really beautiful. So you may not have a lot of money, you may not have a lot of power, but you have what Dr. King and Gandhi and others call soul power. Just using your body as a nonviolent instrument, as a tool, you can change things. You can inspire hundreds and thousands and millions of people to speak up, to speak out.
I walked away with an attitude that if our country is screwed up,
Still is.
don't give up. Unscrew it. Don't give up.
Man.
Which in retrospect is pretty good for a
Have
bunch
you ever
of
heard,
teenagers.
do you listen to X-Ray Specs?
Yeah.
Do you know the song Warrior and Woolworths?
That's about this, right?
Yeah, can you pull it up real quick, just
Yeah.
for the fun of it? Just we won't listen to the whole thing. It's a pretty cool song. For those of you that don't know, X-Ray Specs is a pretty cool band from England.
Do you want the live or do you want the album one?
Just do the album one. I don't know. Or you want to do live? You think it's better?
Yeah, fuck it.
Okay. Female fronted, I believe she was queer female. Cool music. And I couldn't find it.
I can barely hear you. What'd you say, Pat?
You can stop it now.
All right,
fine. Vika 718, fronted by the daughter of a Somali-born dock worker. Shout out to Polystyrene and the X-Ray Specs.
Hell yeah. And that's punk.
That is punk rock.
Oh, no.
Nope. All right. Is this me? Or...
Yeah, I think it's you, okay. And I can't wait for this because and here enters right the man. All right, yeah.
Okay. Malcolm's rhetoric matched the tenor of the times. Ella Baker, a longtime critic of Martin Luther King. I don't know if you guys remember, we talked about Ella Baker previously. Like we visited her Wikipedia page real quick, and we're going to go a little bit more into the depth with her right here. Malcolm's rhetoric matched the tenor of the times. Ella Baker, a longtime critic of Martin Luther King Jr., recognized the sit-ins as a long-awaited opportunity. Baker organized an Easter weekend meeting at Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina, aimed to harness the political energies unleashed by the student activists. Time with King had convinced Baker that the movement needed a grassroots leadership that wasn't enmeshed with middle-class preachers. The meeting attracted dozens of the most gifted and dedicated student organizers around the country, many of whom remained impressed by King, who helped to sponsor the event. Baker urged them to turn the insurgent sit-in demonstrations into a permanent organization, one unattached to any existing civil rights group, untethered to any pre-existing agenda, and unencumbered by top-down leadership. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was born from these deliberations. So what we see here now is the birth of SNCC, SNCC, which is a major player in the the development of the civil rights movement. So SNCC is born because of the work of Ella Baker. SNCC activists became soldiers on freedom's southern battlegrounds, practicing the tedious, dangerous, and unacknowledged work of organizing poor black sharecroppers in southwest Georgia, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, and throughout the South. But SNCC's reach also extended along both coasts, where friends of SNCC groups popped up to organize sympathy demonstrations, hold fundraising events, and help publicize the group's efforts nationally. SNCC's campus affiliates, especially Howard University's Nonviolent Action Group, became effective lobbying organizations protesting for racial integration in the building trades, testifying before the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, and lending the edge of northern militancy to the group's southern roots. SNCC also attracted religious students enthralled by King's example. Alabama native John Lewis, South Carolina's brilliantly combative Ruby Doris Smith Robinson, Atlanta's cosmopolitan Brahmin Julian Bond, and New Yorker with Caribbean roots Stokely Carmichael all gravitated towards SNCC. Unelected Airwaves. I don't know if you're looking right now, but this book finally came. I believe that this came by your recommendation, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
I'm pretty sure it did.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how I found out about this.
But yes,
I ordered it shortly after.
For those that don't know, Carmichael Stokely later changes his name to Kwame Ture, and you can find a number of his videos on YouTube, and you can hear him talk about what?
We have one of them here.
Now, is it the one where he's talking about driving
Not
around, being
Kwame. It's
chased?
him while he's in SNCC. I
Oh,
wanted to
okay,
keep
okay.
it to
Right,
the
right.
to the time period, so it's a very early. No, no, Matt. It was Who Paid the Piper? The CIA and the Cultural Cold War. There was like a Twitter thread that we were going through that I think that you had linked to us on one of the Fridays.
One of them.
One of them. But just to get back to a little bit of what we were saying here, Ella Baker, for those that don't remember, is that as Martin Luther King was coming to prominence, Ella Baker was a part of his movement and helped organize his nonviolent movement. And King did not really want women as his political peers necessarily. King had a lot of internalized misogyny, and this not only played out in his personal life but also in his political organization. And thus, there's a couple of her criticisms of King laid out here, and also that was another one of the issues, is that he was a little bit of a misogynist with those that he put as his political equals.
Kind of shitty.
Go ahead. A little shitty. We got to take the good with the bad here for Dr. King. So here we have a little bit more information on Ella Baker. And with this, it'll give us a little bit more information on SNCC as well, because that's a major point here, is that SNCC is born from these deliberations of Ella Baker.
What do two of the most important civil rights
Hey, it's our guy.
organizations have
It
in
is.
common?
Oh, wait, there's already captions.
Meet Ella Baker, the brilliant black woman whose ideas and careful grassroots organizing helped give birth to Dr. King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference and to the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. For this reason, Ella Baker is reverentially known as the mother of the civil rights movement.
Very underrated,
Born
very
in Virginia
unsung.
in
Right?
1903, Ella Baker was educated at Shaw University before moving to New York City in 1927. By 1930, she'd started organizing.
God damn!
Ella Baker joined the NAACP in 1940 and helped young leaders find their voice and their leadership capacity. And one of those people was Rosa Parks, someone we all know. Ella Baker was also recruited by Martin Luther King to help run the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which was helping to build the civil rights movement.
Then in 1960, a group of black college students were denied service at Woolworth's segregated lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina. In an act of nonviolent protest, the students refused to leave, inspiring similar sit-ins across the South.
Ella Baker left SCLC to help a group of young people form the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
I remember Miss Baker saying, many of you are from some of the quote-unquote best schools in the country, so when you go into rural areas, don't go in there thinking you're going to lead the people. Find out what the people want.
When you heard Ella Baker speak, you were ready to get out there. She really wanted us to stand up and speak out. And she gave you the energy to push. You can lead, you can be somebody, you can do something.
More interested in effecting change than public acclaim or financial reward, Baker inspired a generation of young Americans to risk their lives to fight racism, sexism, and white supremacy. Simply put, the mother of the civil rights movement had many children, and we are her heirs.
Yeah, so that's Ella Baker, pretty much, one of the foundational contributors to SNCC and also Dr. King's organization as well. Probably very underrated and unsung for her efforts in the civil rights movement, because I'm just learning about her honestly now. Prior to reading this book, if you had asked me who Ella Baker was, I probably wouldn't have had a good answer for you.
Thank you for that link, Baldwin's Ghost. Just for chat's information, the New York Public Library has Ella Baker's papers, some of which are digitalized.
What do two of the most important civil rights organizations have?
They're in the computer.
So now here's our guy. I included this because this is Stokely Carmichael when he was in SNCC as an active member of SNCC, and it just gives a little bit. It's fun to watch him talk. First of all, I enjoy it, and just hearing kind of his perspectives as he was an active participant in SNCC, I think is useful to contextualize the entire movement.
I just noticed the fucking description of the video.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a video of him when he's much older talking about driving around late at night being chased by the Klan in like a car with somebody from SNCC. And, he's like, got his head on a swivel. He's all worried. And, the interviewer asked him, like, were you guys armed? He's like, oh yeah, we were armed. He was like, as soon as I had the gun in my hand, I felt much better.
Yeah.
You're one black man who went to a good, essentially white high school in the city of New York. You obviously had a good education. A good many of the people who work with you here in SNCC can say the same thing.
And we're saying that...
And you're a black man who came from a New York ghetto.
And we're saying that there's a system that allows for one or two black people to get out. And that's the rationale for keeping other black people down.
And it has nothing to do with the unwillingness or inability of the Negro to help himself and to work hard.
That's the rationale, that the reason why black people aren't this is because they're lazy, unambitious, stupid, have rhythm, and they eat watermelon.
You call on the black man to refuse to respond to his draft call.
That is correct. And we will continue to do so while there's breath in our bodies.
Do you really believe that the military policies of the United States are designed to exterminate the black man, as you've said?
I most certainly do. I look at the recent statement by racist McNamara, who says that 30% of the people that are going to be drafted now under his new system are going to be black people, and that's nothing more than black urban removal.
The white liberal who supported civil rights for so long with time and effort and money, what is your feeling about him?
Well, I think that there's no reason why they should stop supporting the movement now. I certainly feel that if they're genuinely interested in black people, and since black people have charted a course, they believe in that program, they will continue to give to it. They need more white people to civilize whites. They need them to civilize the savages in Cicero, who throw rocks and bricks at a peaceful and lovable black man like Dr. Martin Luther King, who would not even hurt a fly. Well, that's very important, because our uncles and our fathers and our older brothers died in World War I fighting Nazism to protect the Poles, and those same Poles turn around and throw rocks and bricks at us after we died to save their lives. And people talk about we are savages.
Mr. Carmichael, if you had the chance to stand up in front of the white community and say anything you desired, say to him, understand me, white man, what would you say?
I would say, understand yourself, white man, that the white man's burden should not have been preached in Africa, but it should have been preached among you. That you need now to civilize yourself. You have moved to destroy and disrupt. You have taken people away. You have broken down their systems, and you have called all that civilization. And we who have suffered at this are now saying to you, you are the killers of the dreams. You are the savages. Yes, it is you who have always been uncivilized. Civilize yourself.
I love him. I love him.
Just phenomenal. Just a phenomenal response to maybe that was the guy from 60 Minutes.
It might have been.
Yeah, it may have been. I'm not positive, but very glad that I could sneak that early Stokely Carmichael talk in there. He's so young in that. He must have been so early in his political career there. But this is a representation of what SNCC was. You know, Ella Baker, Stokely Carmichael. You know, this was another current of the civil rights movement that is growing parallel to Martin Luther King's more religious movement and, you know, Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam.
I realized that was what Forrest Gump was referring to. Wait, which part of Forrest Gump?
Black people and mentally disabled people too. Remember McNamara's? I'm not sure. I'm not 100% positive what that meant.
Nope. All right.
All right. This is you.
All right. Malcolm spent 1961 honing his speaking style for general audiences. He practiced introducing himself for his frequent radio appearances, often bypassing the host's canned remarks about reverse racism and black supremacy in favor of a respectfully succinct introduction. Quote, I represent Mr. Elijah Muhammad, the spiritual head of the fastest growing group of Muslims in the Western Hemisphere. Malcolm enjoyed debating civil rights moderates and black intellectuals, whom he derisively referred to as professional Negroes. For Malcolm, such spokesmen were little more than puppets for the white man. He also relished publicly sparring with racial integrationists, and he participated in 2 high-profile debates that year. The first with Reverend William James, a Harlem pastor, on WMCA radio, and the same station that had carried his Barry Gray debate. The second, at Yale University Law School, featured NAACP Youth Secretary Herbert Wright. In both instances, Malcolm characterized the NOI's racial separatism as a philosophy based on strength and the realization that America's practice of racial segregation represented the country's core principles, where civil rights activists, most notably King, argued that racial integration reflected the deepest aspirations of both whites and blacks. Malcolm objected. He defined segregation as the control of Negro bodies by whites, in contrast to separation, which was the voluntary promotion of self-determination for a black community in search of its own place in the world. You see here. This is
So we already had Malcolm debating Bayard Ruskin earlier. So we don't need to get too much into the debate footage of Malcolm X. You know, I snuck it in there earlier, but yeah, we can move forward from this. This is just kind of like illustrates kind of what was going on between the 2 camps at this time.
Well, I think that like it's interesting how both kind of aren't really talking about I am not a class reductionist, but I do think it's interesting that their analysis, both of them, fall short because of a lack of class analysis to it. That like I can see where Malcolm is coming from, that he wants things like Black Wall Street. He wants like black neighborhoods that are able to financially and economically like flourish, right? And you know, what the fuck is it? Martin wants that same thing, but to happen alongside, you know, a white middle class, or like, you know, a white, you know, what like, you know, economic growth, right? Mm-hmm. But the issue is that you are not going to be allowed to see either.
Right. This is me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Malcolm told reporters that thousands of non-Muslims planned to attend the D.C. rally. They felt tired of the slow pace of token integration, too intelligent to submit patiently to continued segregation, and fed up completely with the compromising attitude of Negro leaders, he said. He spread rumors in the black press that the messenger might go to the White House backed by thousands of black folk hungry for bold leadership. The rally's theme, separation or death, highlighted the nation's self-promotion as an uncompromising group who willfully defied the racial integration promoted by civil rights groups in the favor of self-determination. Despite the messenger's absence due to illness, the event attracted between 7,500 and 10,000, a crowd that demonstrated the NOI's growing national appeal. 3,000 Muslims from New York alone attended the event. Wallace Muhammad, one of the messenger's sons and protege of Malcolm's, characterized Muslims as peaceful people who can cause a great deal of trouble and needed to be taken seriously. Any Negro trying to integrate is actually admitting his inferiority, said Malcolm, because he is also admitting that he wants to become part of a superior society. So this is an interesting dynamic here. First of all, it just goes to really show, how much influence and popularity that the Nation of Islam and Malcolm X has, you know, holding a rally in DC, having almost up to 10,000 people there, and 3,000 of them all traveling from New York City, really shows the popularity that this organization commanded. Also, did you mean to go forward there?
I did not mean to go forward there. I'm sorry.
You can go back. There you go. Okay, and also this part here. So it really shows further. So if you remember before Martin Luther King wrote of segregation that it was like the most repugnant, that his feeling of being segregated was like destroyed him internally with this feeling of indignity and repugnance. And then you hear Malcolm so differently saying that, you know, it's separation or death is the name of this rally. Separation or death. That's how strongly he feels of separation. And he goes so far to say that even being interested in integration is implicitly confirming that there's a superior society, a white society that you're not part of, and that you're trying to appease the white man to be a part of. Not saying that I necessarily believe that, but it's interesting to hear Malcolm's perspective there.
So, Baldwin's Ghost, what I mean when I say, because, you know, your comment, I feel like class angle is kind of irrelevant, consider how racist white working class was and is. Point being, what value is a class analysis in this situation? Is that, like, in order for, like, that economic growth, that flourishing of, like, you know, a black separatist you know, neighborhood, city, town, area that Malcolm, you know, is fighting for, right, would still require for there to be some to have less and some to have more. For there to be, you know, like, you know, a black bourgeoisie or a black, you know, what would you call it, petite bourgeois, right? And people to work for that black petite bourgeois, right? It's kind of like why, you know, black capitalism, right? Which, you know, he's not really arguing that, like, oh, and this separatist, you know, black neighborhood, right? You know, or this black separatist thing is going to be influenced by socialism or anything at this point, right? It's just going to recreate, you know, a lower and upper class, or it's going to create, like, you know, a mirrored image of, you know, smaller white neighborhoods, right? But with black people, you know. And for Martin Luther King, you know, it's kind of like, all right, so, like, what is it that, like, you know, you're asking for? Is for just, like, you know, black poor people to be alongside white poor people? You know, is that, like, just the end goal is the integration of that at this point? Because he has yet to make, like, you know, speeches talking about how, you know, the evils of capitalism, or, like, you know, how the capitalist state within the U.S. has failed everybody. Race, which is the foundation of racism, is produced from class antagonism. Both were constructed to weaken the masses and strengthen the capitalists, and any study of race must include class. Same to any study of class must include race for it to make any sense at all.
Yeah, that's kind of the position that I take. This, like, almost like inextricable relation between class and race, that, like, to you know, only simplistically, like, reduce it to one or the other is leaving out, like, you know, a great deal of the nuance required to understand it.
Yes.
And then also, Dave, I was going to bring up that, you know, Fred Hampton had that exact quote, and Huey Newton wrote extensively, if you have To Die for the People, which is a collection of writings by Huey Newton. He talks about this black capitalism quite a bit, where we don't want to have black people to have rights just so that they can be capitalists to their own people. We don't want a black bourgeoisie that's going to treat lower class black people the same way that white people have been treating us. We you know, that this black liberation can only come through socialism.
Exactly. You know, and you know, I'm saying this in the most, like, friendliest way possible. I'm not, like, you know, trying to point you out or make you feel uncomfortable at all, Baldwin. So yeah, I think that we've succinctly answered that.
Yeah. All right, folks, here we are. Johnny, will you do the honors?
Oh, hell yeah. Papa Fidel. Fidel Castro's unexpected visit to Harlem in September 1961, and by the way, I've seen the hotel, September 1961 confirmed Malcolm's new status. Black America's prosecuting attorney now shifted into a new role as the unofficial prime minister of African American radicalism. Castro, the dynamic young lawyer turned revolutionary guerrilla, led the 1959 Cuban Revolution that deposed the American-backed regime of Fulgencio Batista A vocal critic of Western-style democracies, capitalism, and imperialism, Castro alarmed American political leaders and anti-communist Cold Warriors, even as he galvanized supporters of anti-colonial movements around the world. Cuba inspired large swaths of the American left, including black radicals who toured the island, wrote articles about the new government's efforts to eliminate racial segregation, and touted Castro as an anti-racist leader bold enough to criticize America's Jim Crow policies and offer rhetorical support for liberation movements raging through Africa, the Caribbean, and Latin America. Malcolm met Fidel Castro during a midnight session that included reporters, photographers, and an interpreter. I had always wanted to come to Harlem, but I was not sure what kind of welcome I would get, said Castro, holding court in his 9th floor suite. When I got news that I would be welcomed in Harlem, I was happy. As photographers took pictures of the two leaders smiling and chatting amiably, Malcolm assured Castro that we in Harlem are not addicted to the propaganda they put out. The New York Amsterdam News gained exclusive access and carried a front-page story of the meeting, which showcased the ties between liberation struggles in Black America and in the rest of the world.
Go ahead and just move to the next slide because it's a picture.
This is just such like a wholesome picture because like just that
wholesome.
That genuine excitement and just like
you can't fake that smile.
No.
You can't fake that smile.
It's like from ear to ear, man.
That's a sincere. And let me say, Malcolm X, not a guy that I see smile that often. I've watched a lot of footage and I viewed a lot of pictures of Malcolm recently. Very rarely have I seen such a wide smile on the face of Malcolm X.
You know what you do see? You do see kind of like that like wry smile where it's just like, I'm about to fuck this motherfucker up. Like, did you just say that dumb shit? It's like that kind of like smile where it's just like, I'm so angry at you right now.
And all I can do is smile. Just two dudes being bros. That's all we have here. Just a couple dudes being bros.
Yeah, like you know, Fidel, I don't even think he's like 40 yet, right?
No. This is like literally 1960, I think.
I think we do.
Are they?
Yeah, I believe this is.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good.
Very early in the season.
I gotta get a can of chickpeas that are up too high for my wife to reach. Hang on one second.
Why don't you move this over to the next slide? Okay, go ahead.
No, I'll move it to the next slide.
All right, so to continue on the Castro situation, during their brief stay at the Shelburne Hotel in Midtown Manhattan, the entire Cuban delegation alleged mistreatment that smacked of racism, while Shelburne staff accused them of obnoxious behavior, unleashing recriminations that left all parties dissatisfied. The Cubans relocated to the Hotel Teresa in Harlem. Castro, dressed in immaculately creased green fatigues, sat on the edge of a bed in his suite and invited Malcolm, wearing an overcoat, suit, and tie, to sit next to him. Malcolm greeted Castro, fully aware of the problems the delegation had at the Shelburne. Downtown for you, it was ice. Uptown, it is warm, Malcolm announced in an opening volley that Castro heartily embraced. Ah, yes, we feel very warm here, he said in halting, broken English. They discussed racial politics in America and around the world, with Castro remarking that Cuba accomplished in 18 months what you were still trying to do for 400 years. Castro touted efforts to end racial discrimination in Cuba as evidence of the kind of international solidarity that Malcolm had been preaching since he first learned of the Bandung Conference. We are all brothers, explained Cuba's young leader. The new nations and we in Latin America are all African Americans, he asserted, pointing to the 14 African countries newly recognized by the United Nations. Malcolm and Castro bonded over shared reputations as unconventional political mavericks. Looking good for 34. Yeah, so, and this first line that they have here where they talk about the alleged mistreatment that smacked of racism. This is where what actually they're referring to is that, so there had this like United Nations meeting where there's leaders from all over the world coming and they're staying at the Hotel Sheraton in New York. And the hotel said that they were accusing the Cuban delegation of trying to pluck live chickens in their room, or that they would be doing that or something. And they asked the Cubans for a very large deposit to stay in the room, that they were not asking many of the other, visiting dignitaries. So they asked Castro and the team of Cubans for a large deposit, and they obviously felt scorn from this. So the Sheraton was the large suite that was booked for all these traveling dignitaries, and because of this like racist treatment and asking them for all this money, they ended up in uptown Harlem staying at the Teresa with Malcolm X. Malcolm X is the one that sourced this hotel for them.
And I've been to that hotel. I actually got to see Immortal Technique give a speech at the port. It was during the Puerto Rican Day Parade in front of the hotel where Fidel and Malcolm met. It's right near that square. Shit, I forget the name of it.
Go forward one real quick, and if you want to know how Harlem felt, okay, never mind. That's gonna go forward. There's just another picture of them together. You can move forward.
Now, tell me you like they should get fucking Liam Neeson to play Fidel Castro.
You could just get Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, just get Justin Trudeau. He would love, putting on like a fake beard. He loves playing dress up.
All right, go ahead.
Malcolm's meeting with Castro turned into a public relations coup, as well as a small rebellion against the messenger's strict orders to avoid political activism. The high-profile appearance acknowledged that the nation was more than just a religious group led by a former Georgia sharecropper. It identified the organization as a political force within the United States, important enough to warrant a meeting with the new leader of a revolutionary Cuba. As the black press feted Castro as a charismatic political ally, Malcolm defended himself against the external charges of subversion in the press and internal grumblings among Muslims who considered his unsanctioned meeting to be reckless. Elijah Muhammad went as far as to publicly rebuking his protege through an interview with Washington Post reporter Wallace Terry, saying that if he had known Malcolm planned to meet Castro, he would have prevented it. Muhammad's anger over the meeting was based on several considerations. The 63-year-old messenger suffered from debilitating pulmonary disease. Rumors that Malcolm would take over the nation after his death increased with each passing day. Also, his alliance with the messenger's son, Wallace, touched off alarm bells within the royal family, and his unauthorized sit-down with Castro further strengthened the impression, within and outside the group, that Malcolm operated independently of Muhammad's leadership. Yeah, we need to have an intersectionalist approach to even come close to having the right approach based on our respective material conditions. Hey, Psyker, what's good? To kind of like just look to end the thing going on in chat about race and class is that and I've talked about this probably in other chats. I know in Seb's when he was streaming for 10 hours the other day that class stratifies, right? Class stratifies, right? And it intersects, right? Based on, material circumstances, right? And you remember how I was saying that, race, 13 plus hours? Jesus, is that why he's not here today? So, God damn it. While race is not real, racism is real, right? So that class, that intersecting of class, that stratification of class, right, is going to have material circumstances, right, and the social phenomena that go on, right, that include things like racism. Am I making any sense here?
Yeah.
All right. So it's not that we're trying to reduce everything to class.
Yeah.
Class
and
produces these things.
Back to the slide here. This is where we really start to see the a little bit of the departure between Malcolm and the Elijah Muhammad, as well as the Nation of Islam. Malcolm is seeing like I guess like a more broad vision of black liberation, and from not just domestically but worldwide. And he's seen the third world. He's meeting with Castro, and Elijah Muhammad sees this growing and diverse Malcolm X that is not just completely one-dimensional in terms of his adherence to the structure of the Nation of Islam. So we can see here a little bit of growth there and a little bit of antagonism between Malcolm and the Nation of Islam. So that's foreshadowings for some future events that will come.
Yeah, like I think that
Go ahead.
Malcolm just keeps seeing like the Bandung conference, the non-aligned movement, and he's like, we need that. We need that kind of energy.
Yeah, absolutely. So here, if you were curious about how how Fidel Castro was received in Harlem at the time of his visit at the Hotel Chelsea, this is a little bit of a lesser distributed photo here of what the residents of Harlem were doing while he was visiting their section, this was a major thing because at this time in 1960, Harlem was a lot different than it was today. It was a place that many white people, or especially visiting dignitaries from other countries, would go through great pains to avoid. Many of the people that are visiting from Europe or other places would not be caught dead in Harlem. Meanwhile, Fidel Castro was there and he's praising Harlem. He says he loves being in Harlem. So, for the people in Harlem, this is a big deal. For a second, they're being looked at as human beings. They're being looked at as a real community by someone from the international stage.
Right. And if there's one thing that you can definitely count on with Fidel, right? And like we've talked about, like his past, right, of homophobia and stuff like that. But if there's one thing that he most certainly is not, racist is not an accusation that sticks at all. Because even before he was a communist, right, he went out of his way as a lawyer to defend campesinos and Afro-Cuban campesinos at that.
Absolutely. This is you now?
No, this is
you.
you.
Me. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So despite the messenger's disapproval of his freelance diplomacy, Malcolm continued using the cover of his membership in the 28th Precinct's Welcoming Committee, not only to gain access to a secular world Muhammad insisted was doomed, but to shape that world politically. Participation in the committee represented Malcolm's assumptions of political leadership in Harlem. Fidel Castro has denounced racial discrimination in Cuba, which is more than President Eisenhower has done here in America. Malcolm defiantly told reporters from the Pittsburgh Courier, Castro's stance against lynching, a position the president refused to publicly take, was reason enough to meet with him, even though Malcolm backpedaled from pro-communist statements. I went to see Castro as a Muslim, Malcolm assured reporters. Still, he remained unapologetic about the meeting, claiming he preferred to be seen with Castro than with some prominent white people here in the United States. He praised Castro as the only white person he ever liked. So in the chat, no one guessed correctly. At this point, during this interview with Malcolm X, Fidel Castro, his favorite white, I think you can deduct that he was his favorite white person if he is literally the only white person that he ever liked. But through his own words, Malcolm X's favorite white person, Fidel Castro.
Yeah, I'm honestly shocked nobody in chat even tried to bring up the John Brown quote that I think is often attributed to him or anything. Like, and it's also funny that, like, he's saying that Fidel Castro is the only white person he really, even though most other white people are going to be like, that ain't white.
Yeah, exactly. But, in terms of in Cuba, that is white.
Right. Exactly. I think even Castro too was another, like, kind of like how Che was actually like Irish. Like, wasn't Castro like,
Yeah, I don't know his exact his ethnicity in terms of his background, but yeah, he was white by Cuban standards and by Latin standards.
Yeah, Castro's dad was from Galicia, which is that area in between Spain and Portugal. I know because I dated somebody that was what is it, Gallegoan? How would you pronounce it? Galician? I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah. Red Wizard, yeah, probably Spanish background. That's what I was gonna assume as well.
Well, David says that his dad was from Galicia. What is this? Oh. What? All right. Well, I've actually been meaning to pull this up. Oh, it didn't work. Did it? Can I get it to work? Nope. I was hoping I could pull up my Banhammer chat box, but it's just not working right now. So I'm just gonna have to do it
What is the first part that I don't even understand? What
I
is Sirona? Like I understand what they're putting together there, but what is that?
I don't know.
Like I read the rest of it and I understood what they were like, but like what was that first part of it? I don't even understand what they're talking about.
I really don't. I don't think they do either.
Yeah, they got a couple seconds to slap the keyboard and they did what they could.
Valiant effort. I'll give it a.
How will the Jews ever recover from that comment?
Many Cubans got Spanish links. I assume. Here go is Spanish. Yeah, I mean, like, is it though? I thought it was like that. Or am I thinking of Galicia?
Spicy one. I'm sorry.
I understood Che, but I don't know if Fidel is why. Americans still think Latinx is funny, and they are all shades of caramel. I mean, like, don't judge me for using Italian X, ironically. We need to work on your banning skills. Yeah, no, I know. I had the little thing pulled up. I tried clicking it. I don't know why. I need to do just like a test stream for like 2 hours or something one day, or maybe on a Friday. We'll just literally use that as an opportunity to be like, why does OBS refuse to work?
We need volunteers to be racist in the chat. We promise we won't take any pictures.
Yeah, you missed it, man. He was about to start going off about like the Elders of Zion and the Harry Potter game or something. I don't know, man.
It was how Harry Potter and transgenderism and Jewish things are all interrelated. They did a remarkable amount.
I mean, like, he wasn't totally wrong with the Harry Potter game. They are all in there, but like, outside of the Harry Potter game, no, not really.
I don't know anything about that.
Any volunteers to be a banned subject this Friday? Really starts typing about Brazilians. All right.
We didn't give them attention until after they were banned, to be fair. This is you.
All right. Ghanaian President Kwame Nkrumah spoke in Harlem 1 week later. Nkrumah represented the latest third world revolutionary to visit Harlem in a fortnight. I think that means, what, like 40 days, right? Something like that.
Pull it up.
Following appearances by Castro, Egypt's...
Dude, I'm such an idiot. I literally...
What?
Fortnite into... I literally just like Fortnite into...
Did you spell it like the game?
Yeah, I did. A fortnight is a unit of time equal to 14 days.
Okay, so I was right. 40 days.
It was a mistake.
We are brain broken here.
The Industrial Revolution was a mistake.
All right, so let's see if I'm going to be able to pronounce this name coming up. Following appearances by Castro, Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser, and India's Jawaharlal Nehru on a stage outside the Hotel Teresa, Nkrumah called Negroes the strongest link between the people of North America and the people of Africa. The speech echoed Malcolm's burgeoning Pan-Africanism. I wanted you to know that my presence in Harlem would show the solid bond we feel between the people of Africa and the Afro-Americans in this country, proclaimed Nkrumah, deploying the descriptive term for blacks favored by Malcolm X. 1,000 people attended an afternoon rally, made all the more remarkable by the fact that Malcolm's radical message of Pan-African solidarity as the key to black liberation at home was becoming mainstream. Nkrumah reminisced about his time spent in Harlem as a young man and invited Black America's artisans, doctors, scientists to Ghana to aid a revolution that offered the tantalizing hope of ending colonial rule in Africa and around the world. Nkrumah's passionate words about the loss of dignity for the African people, representing a loss of dignity for people of African descent everywhere, would resonate immediately in the new year following the news of the assassination of Congolese Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba, which we've spoken about, I think, during... Was it Black Shirts and Reds or was it The Divide?
But we're going to talk about it again. I have a little bit of content here just to kind of focus on that as well, because there's some really interesting stuff that centers around this. So just know that we will be watching a video on Patrice Lumumba. It might be that. Can you just go to the next slide? I just want to see what we have there. Okay. Well, first of all, that's Nkrumah speaking in Harlem. Like I said, go forward one more.
One more? What does that say? Dr. Bunchy and his bunch? Who dat?
There is like a close up there of Nkrumah and Malcolm.
Who's this guy?
I don't know. I at first I was like, maybe that's Nasser, but it's not. I don't think that's Nasser.
That can't be Nasser.
Okay, it's not Nasser.
It could be, but it's probably not.
I was just saying, there's Kwame and Malcolm sitting there together. So you can go for it. Okay.
Wait, where's Malcolm in this picture?
Right above Kwame.
Oh, shit. All right, yeah.
Fool. You fool.
You fool.
Malcolm's rhetoric and the Nation of Islam's disciplined presence galvanized black nationalists in Harlem. The death of the Congolese Prime Minister Lumumba on January 17, 1961, compelled them to action. Lumumba was a political activist who had been released from jail to serve as the former Belgian Congo's first democratically elected prime minister the previous summer. Young, handsome, and an outspoken critic of Western colonialism, he became an icon of African independence in 1960. The United Nations called the start of the new decade the Year of Africa. And many black radicals in America considered Lumumba to be the continent's brightest star. But an alliance between Belgian officials and Congolese reactionaries, with the implicit approval of America's State Department, which blanched at the young prime minister's overtures to the Soviet Union, sealed Lumumba's fate. News of his death reached the States in February, and Harlem activists, many with direct ties to Malcolm X, organized an unprecedented demonstration in the UN building. The New York Amsterdam news editor, James Higgs, called Lumumba's death an international lynching of a black man on the altar of white supremacy. The Congo crisis rescued an earlier generation of black activists from political obscurity, unleashing a torrent of organizing energies that allowed fledgling black nationalists, seasoned Marxists, and anti-colonialists of all stripes to find a unity of purpose. The tragedy also offered an international seminar in world affairs for budding Pan-Africanists such as Maya Angelou and literary troublemaker Leroy Jones, as well as Harlem nationalists poised to bear public witness against lynching staged before the world under the auspices of the United Nations. So, Johnny, This is something I learned, and you were reading it, but prior to reading this, did you know that Harlem activists with ties to Malcolm X essentially stormed the UN building in protest of Patrice Lumumba's death?
No.
Did you know that there was protests worldwide at Belgian embassies?
No.
All right, we're gonna watch some videos.
Sick.
I actually put like 3 or 4 videos. There's some they're all short, but this is such an incredible situation that I really did not know enough about. And I've read entire books on Lumumba, but mostly just about the situation in the Congo. There's just move forward. So the first video that we want to go over is just a quick 8-minute video, just a little bit about Patrice Lumumba for anybody in the classroom that isn't maybe like adept on Lumumba, who he was and what he did. We're just going to watch this real quick as a refresher.
Just to let you all know, this is a Turkish public broadcast service.
Is that bad? What?
Why would it be bad?
I don't know.
Also, I want to know who Leroy Jones is now, because I'm sorry, I'm an uneducated, ignorant swine that doesn't know.
Malcolm X called him the greatest black man who ever walked the African continent, while Belgium and the US plotted his assassination. His name was Patrice Lumumba, the first Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo. He's considered by many a martyred hero, a symbol of anti-imperialism and Pan-African unity. This is the story of how Lumumba came to power, dreaming of a better future for the Congo and Africa, and how that dream quickly turned into a nightmare as he was arrested and murdered in January of 1961, less than 7 months after independence.
La République du Congo a été proclamée. Et notre pays est maintenant entre les mains de ses propres enfants. Nous allons établir ensemble la justice sociale et assurer que les terres de notre patrie profitent véritablement à ses enfants. Voilà, sire, Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs, mes chers compatriotes, mes frères de lutte, mes frères de race, voilà ce que j'ai voulu vous dire. Vive l'indépendance de l'unité africaine, vive le Congo indépendant et souverain.
Hell yeah.
Lumumba was born in 1925 in the village of Onalua in Kasai province in the Congo. At the time his country, the DRC, was a Belgian colony, the Belgian Congo. He was a member of the small Batata ethnic group. Young Lumumba attended a Protestant mission school. After that, he went on to work in the city of Kindu-Port-en-Pin, where he began to write essays and poems for Congolese journals. Lumumba at the time actually applied for and received Belgian citizenship, after which he moved to the capital Leopoldville, now known as Kinshasa. He started working as a postal clerk and went on to become an accountant in the post office in Stanleyville, now known as Kinsigane. During this time, he was still actively contributing to the Congolese press. His entry into politics started at the grassroots level. In 1955, Lumumba became regional president of a Congolese trade union of government employees, as well as an active member of the Belgian Liberal Party in the Congo. The trade union he was running was not affiliated to the two main Belgian federations, much to the ire of Belgium's colonial administrators. In 1956, he was invited by the Ministry of Colonies to a study tour in Belgium, which he attended only to be arrested upon his arrival back to the Congo, with charges of embezzling money from the post office. He served a 12-month sentence, and once free, Lumumba launched the Congolese National Movement, or the MNC, the first nationwide political party in the Congo. In 1958, the same year he launched this party, Lumumba attended the first All-African People's Conference in Accra, Ghana. His vision and Pan-African vocabulary impressed the gathering and turned eyes across the continent. Taking notice of the nationalist fervor on the rise across Africa, and with anti-colonial independence struggles at full throttle, the Belgian government announced local elections in December 1959. Lumumba's MNC wanted to boycott the race, deeming it an illegitimate Belgian attempt at installing a puppet government. Many Congolese boycotted in protest, and the Belgian authorities responded with repression. 30 Congolese were killed in Stanleyville, Kinsigane, and Lumumba was arrested on charges of inciting a riot. The MNC changed its tactics and decided to join the election race. They claimed a sweeping victory with 90% of the vote and demanded the release of Lumumba in order to discuss the formation of a government and national independence. Their demands were met, and Lumumba became the first prime minister of his country in 1960. On Independence Day, while the King of Belgium was attending and the world was watching, Lumumba delivered a powerful speech that would live on as a benchmark for the anti-imperial struggle in Africa and the world.
L'indépendance du Congo, si elle est proclamée aujourd'hui dans l'entente avec la Belgique, pays ami, avec qui nous traitons d'égal à égal, nul Congolais digne de ce nom ne pourra jamais oublier que c'est par la lutte qu'elle a été conquise. Une lutte dans laquelle nous n'avons ménagé ni nos forces, ni nos privations, ni nos souffrances, ni notre sang.
Immediately after Congolese
That's what
independence and the
he
start of
thought.
Lumumba's prime ministership, units of the army rebelled, largely because of objections to their Belgian commander. Belgium
United
sent in
States, like cold
6,000
Margaret.
troops, announcing that they were in place for the protection of Belgian nationals in the country. A day later, a man named Moise Tshombe took advantage of the power struggle and proclaimed the secession of the mineral-rich province of Katanga from the Congo, with support from the Belgian government and mining companies. In reality, it was a treacherous move. The Belgian troops protected and supported Tshombe's rebellion. They had moved in to secure its colonial cash cow and undermine Lumumba's rule. Running out of options, Lumumba reached out to the United Nations to expel Belgian forces and help restore internal order. Lumumba requested UN troops to suppress the rebellion in Katanga, but the UN forces were not authorized to do so under their mandate.
Sure.
The United States and France also refused to budge. Frustrated with the West, Lumumba tilted the balance and reached out to the Soviet Union, requesting planes to fly his army to Katanga. Lumumba, a skilled statesman, also assembled African heads of state in Leopoldville, Kinshasa, asking for their full support in his efforts to quell the rebellion and unify the DRC. Lumumba's ambition was to free the Congo and Africa of foreign colonial influence. He advocated a theory of positive neutralism, meaning that his administration would focus on returning to African values rather than using any imported ideology from the East or the West. But by turning to the Soviet Union, he had now crossed the Cold War red line, and the presence of Soviet military in the heart of Africa, gaining influence in a resource-rich country, made Western powers uncomfortable.
Can't have
To
that.
put it in perspective, the US had actually used uranium from the Congo when it dropped bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So the Congo was very important for the US and its Western allies. But Lumumba's problems did not end there. Internally, he was up against President Kasavubu, who did not approve of Lumumba's actions and wanted a moderate, pro-Western approach and policy. The president fired Lumumba from his position on the 5th of September 1960, after less than 3 months in power.
Oh, thank you for the sub. I don't like Blair Waves. Appreciate
Lumumba
that.
rejected the dismissal on legal grounds, and the two were trapped in a power struggle. A few days later, Army General Mobutu Sese Seko, backed by Belgium and the USA, stepped in and took control of the government. Mobutu reached a working agreement with Kasavubu, and the UN had decided to recognize the legitimacy of the Kasavubu-Mobutu government. When Lumumba tried to escape home confinement, Mobutu had Lumumba arrested again and sent him to Katanga's secessionist forces. Lumumba, alongside two of his associates, Joseph Okito and Maurice Mpolo, were treated deplorably while being held captive. Eventually, on 17th January 1961, the three men were executed by a firing squad with the full knowledge and collaboration of the Belgians. Initially, their bodies were thrown in shallow graves, but later, under the direction of Belgian officers, the bodies were dug up, hacked into pieces, and dissolved in acid. The Katangan government initially tried to hide his death and provide a fake version of events. Their version was quickly disputed, but it took decades to provide the proof of what had happened. Lumumba's death was a shock for Africa and the global anti-colonial movement. In 2002, Belgium apologized to the Congolese people for its role in Lumumba's assassination. In 2013, the US State Department admitted that President Dwight Eisenhower had authorized Lumumba's murder, but said the plan was not carried out. In addition, records show that French diplomats in Africa at the time of Lumumba's murder were calling directly for the elimination of the Congolese leader. And so, there is no way around the fact that there was Western involvement in his assassination, and at the highest level. His death still haunts Congo today, but his legacy lives on, whether it is through references in popular culture,
that was just
such
last
as rap
year.
music, film, and theater. There's even a public square in Belgium in his name. Lumumba will forever be remembered as one of the fathers of independence of the Congo, one of the most visionary African leaders, and the man who did not shy away from defying and challenging colonialism, not for his sake, but the sake of his people, a nobility that cost him his life.
Right. So now we're all up to speed on the great Patrice Lumumba, who he was, what he meant to the anti-colonial movement, what he meant to someone like Malcolm X, who's seeking kind of like their own, in a form, anti-colonial struggle within the United States. And you can see why so many people would be extremely upset about such an event occurring. So move forward a slide.
Yeah, the Soviet Union even named a school after him.
Malcolm X called...
Is this you?
Yeah. While not directly involved in organizing the demonstration, Malcolm's political example framed the protest's confrontational posture and militancy. Angelo, Jones, and Rosa Guy were among those who participated in what the New York Times called an invasion of the UN, while protesters battled security guards inside the organization's 42nd Street headquarters. Hundreds of demonstrators gathered outside First Avenue and 43rd Street in a muscular display of black political radicalism, a scene that would be repeated when groups of black nationalists assembled in Times Square and Harlem to continue protesting Lumumba's murder. Hello, Sachiko Yume. And hello, Pinko the Bear.
Hey, what's up? Awesome.
James Baldwin instantly recognized the UN demonstration as the black community's radical political awakening in support of African independence, third world liberation, and the elimination of Jim Crow. Baldwin's A Negro Essays the Negro Mood appeared in the New York Times and discussed the ways in which politicians studiously avoided analyzing the roots of the UN protests in favor of blaming communist boogeymen and Muslim agitators. Southerners, Baldwin's argued, blamed Northern blacks for civil rights protests, while America, quote, blames the Kremlin. What were you wondering, Pinko the Bear? Sachiko Yume. It's the same color. Mess me up.
We'll see about that. We see here James Baldwin even offering the indictment. So there's these protests that are happening as a direct result of Lumumba's murder. That are causing this. And then you have like the United States government being like, oh, look, see all these protests? This is because of the communists or Muslims Whereas Baldwin astutely, very astutely points out that this is like, you need to look no further than the Jim Crow situation that we're presently experiencing.
Well, I mean, like, I literally have no way of proving if you're lying or telling the truth, Sachiko, and even worse, I don't care.
So I want to get into some of these protests here. So let's go forward.
Yes, sir.
So this is how Malcolm felt about the situation. We watched this video before, and it's really short. It's only a minute and a half, but I just felt like we can't talk about Malcolm and Lumumba without just hearing this one more time. I'm sorry. And if you weren't here, you're in luck because this is a real treat.
Congolese have been massacred by white people in the Congo for years and years and years. And if the shoe is now on the other foot, only thing I can say is it's like chickens that always come back home to roost.
Do you personally feel, though, that there's some shame or involvement here or some guilt associated with the killing of other human beings?
I think that the white people should be ashamed of the deplorable situation that has been existing in the Congo, which is not the fault of the Congolese, but which is the result of instigation by European powers who are fighting each other over the mineral wealth of the Congo. And now to make it appear that the Congolese themselves are criminals or brutes because they're reacting to these injustices that they've been victimized by is again ducking the question.
Shambi is the murderer of Lumumba, who was the rightful prime minister of the Congo. Shambi is the man whose forces fought against the United Nations forces and against the United States, and despite this criminal past of Shambi, now the United States is backing Shambi, who has hired South African mercenaries who are hired killers to disrupt the peaceful efforts of the freedom fighters from Stanleyville to make the type of country there that they want. And it is this American support of Shambi, actually, that's at the root of the whole problem.
Wow, what a succinct, geopolitical analysis.
Yeah. Thank you, Malcolm X.
Thank you, Malcolm X. And what the hell is it? So, like you've talked about, like, or we've talked about rather the colonization of the Congo by the Belgians before, right? We talked about how, like, it was literally just like his private colony to do like monstrous things. And like literally the extraction of resources was almost like an afterthought.
Right. Yeah, the rubber was definitely huge for sure, but yeah, I think it had more to do with Leopold's psychological fixation on making Belgium into something great, and he looked around, and obviously Belgium was coming very, very late, much like Germany, to the colonial table. So when the scramble of Africa was happening, this is why Belgium ended up with the interior of Africa, because much of the coasts were already being colonized by the earlier European powers. But at this point, the Congo was like not even really like discovered. Like it was so deep within Africa that no European had really penetrated there before. And that's where Morgan Stanley, I believe, comes into play as like an explorer who like found this and assisted the Belgians in colonizing it
with his plinth helmet. And yes, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or DRC, has
AI bot in chat.
I guess so, but it brings up an excellent point that like I did kind of want to touch on.
Yeah. The artificial intelligence has brought a very good point, and we appreciate the contribution of the AI.
It does have, a lot of very important minerals such as cobalt, gold, lithium. Now imagine a world, right, where Lumumba...
Imagine Congo.
Yeah, imagine a Congo that actually managed to flourish under the leadership of Patrice Lumumba.
And arrest the control of its own resources, and use those resources, which are extremely lucrative on the world market, to generate income for their own people that they could divert into education, healthcare, public services, infrastructure. Imagine what the Congo could look like instead of being like, and I don't mean this in any kind of like a racist way, but one of the most godforsaken places on the entire planet.
Right.
It's literally like, I think maybe if not the most, in the top 5 most dangerous places that you could ever go to. And this is not because of like some ineptitude of the Congolese people.
No.
This is directly because of the disgusting distortion that this country has had to endure for generations at this point at the hand of European colonizers.
Oh, Matt. Yeah, no, it's just like, you know, in that alternative timeline, right? Maybe like we all are like, you know, less brain broken by, you know, AI chatbots and like, you know, social media, because like we just don't have like, you know, enough cobalt to just endlessly plunder from this country, right? And when we do, it's like, you know, no, you're paying like a fair price for these minerals that are
Oh, we
extracted.
got your cobalt.
Yeah, we
got, it would be like OPEC. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
When OPEC was like, "Oh, you want this oil? Well, guess what? Me and all my boys over here, we got your oil, but you know what I mean? You're gonna have to stop fucking with Palestine."
Right.
Oh, you don't want to stop fucking with Palestine?
All right.
All right.
Time to turn off the
oil. Look, Prankster says, that is true. These resource collections have only increased in volume during the age of computer, battery, and semiconductor booms, facilitated by electric vehicle demand. Cryptocurrency mining and even climate preservation as it's through solar panel productions. I, for one, welcome our AI overlords. This is extremely convenient. I hope that this is just a real person that is like.
It's gotta be. I don't think it's fucking AI. I mean, like I'm here for it. It's entertaining, dude.
Even if it is, like, I gotta end up in our chat talking about the Congo.
Right. Like somebody directed this thing at us. There's no way that like, you know, I'm buying into the fact that like, oh, this is just like, you know, in everybody's chat right now. But what the hell, Sam?
Thank you, comrade.
Sam says, imagine what the periphery could do if they were able to keep their own resources and not be exploited by the hegemony, right? The hegemony being us, right? Being the U.S., being Canada, being like, you know, any of these other countries that like it is an extractive process of resource accumulation. It is not at all a what would you call it, where like both parties, you know,
biotic relationship or a mutually beneficial relationship?
Yes, it's not a mutually beneficial, like, you know, trade. Almost, it's like trade has kind of been like tainted by like U.S. Style of diplomacy, where any other country that like, you know, builds bridges, ports, roads, hospitals, schools, infrastructure, right, in favor of you know, assisting this like development for this country.
I believe sometimes they even let the debt just go.
Yeah, sometimes they just let it go entirely. I mean, I'm not going to name the country. You know what the fuck I'm getting at.
We won't do that. We don't want to, you know, that would be unfair.
Like,
to who I don't know.
to whom I don't know, but like, yeah, look it up. Like, you know, every fucking year, like, you know, a handful of fucking countries, just billions of dollars, right, of debt. Just, yeah, you know what? It's not that important. As long as you're doing all right, you know, just remember who helped you out.
Well,
Which,
and, you know,
fair.
It might not just be all like, oh, you're doing all right. You know what I mean? You know, this country probably has, you know, a large value in accessing. If so, say a country that is absolutely underdeveloped and can't purchase anything has a little bit of help in developing. Now they have, you know, they have markets now, and you know what I mean. This could be mutually beneficial. That, hey, you were like a backward country without any infrastructure. Now you actually have some blossoming industry. You might need X, or you may even need to sell X. Hey, we're over here.
Right. We're not gonna do anything to your government.
You know what I mean? Like,
we're not gonna try and influence any of your politics or anything like that. That's a giant fucking waste of time, right? We've seen how that works out with the way the U.S. does things, right? Eventually, it always like comes back to bite you in the ass, or it doesn't work out, and then like, you know, you're in the hole, or it's like, you know, just a money pit that like you have to keep putting money into, like these warlords or some other fucking dickhead, you know.
And we know about the dickheads.
We know about the dickheads.
Congo.
We're a channel.
Here, this is this here is the reaction. This is the protests and the storming of the UN. This is crazy because I've never seen this before, and watching this, and I even after reading Lumumba, I didn't really know about all this reaction. This is really interesting.
Setting him up for the 5D long con interdimensional chess. Yes.
Yeah, the 5G long con.
Yes, the 5G vaccine long con. Jesus.
This is Movie Tone. Jeffrey Sumner reporting.
Jeffrey Sumner reporting.
Arrest, ill treatment, imprisonment, death. Such was the fate of Patrice Lumumba. And it has been the signal for violent reactions in many parts of the world. First in the United Nations itself, where a Security Council meeting was violently interrupted.
Good.
Fights continued in the lobbies and corridors.
I hope that's a Belgian fucking delegate getting his ass
In the course
whooped.
of this would-be demonstration against the handling of the Congo situation, 18 United Nations guards were injured in making arrests. Now to reaction in Yugoslavia. This was the scene in Belgrade, where a crowd estimated at 150,000 people marched through the streets. A demonstration of disgust and anger. In Paris, the Federation of African Students demonstrated near the Belgian embassy. They said it was to show their concern over events in Africa and to express their mourning at the death of Lumumba. It wasn't long, however, before they were involved in clashes with the police, who aimed at keeping them on the move away from the embassy. A few of the demonstrators, disinclined to obey, were arrested. Finally, reaction in Cairo. Carrying Lumumba's picture, a large crowd marched to the Belgian embassy. Demonstrators climbed the railings and began their anti-Belgian protest by kicking down the embassy shield.
Bicycle bitch-ass motherfucker.
In the BBC television set.
Yeah. So, people were not happy about this Lumumba situation. Go forward. This next video is just a little bit more on the actual UN thing. Because I thought that was so... Yeah, here you go. Anti-Belgium demonstration over Congo crisis.
I'm sorry, I got distracted by the fucking AI again. We'll get to it after. What the fuck? What is this shit?
I don't know what this is. Oh, just hit play. I don't know what's... Wait.
It was an ad.
Sorry. It was an ad, everyone.
The slaying of Patrice Lumumba, deposed Congo premier, touches off worldwide demonstrations, small groups of students and others, as here in Chicago and in London. Credulous pawns, it is believed, of communists and their dupes, in deliberate, organized attempts to undermine democracy and the United Nations. They hardly speak
It's
for
the
the rank and
communists,
file.
see?
Communists in the streets, protesting.
Scenes are rare unless propaganda is served. Demonstrators converge on the Belgian embassy, attacking the Belgians and Dag Hammarskjöld, even as Russia withdraws recognition of the Secretary.
I'm just waiting for that AI bot to just hit something like crazy anti-Semitic. Like it's just a long con of like actual
Gotcha.
interesting facts about what we're talking about, and then it just starts sliding into the racist remarks.
But in 2 months he was out, deposed by arch-political rival President Joseph Kasavubu, who accused him of pro-communism and of creating chaos. Earlier, Lumumba visited the UN with his pro-red Vice Premier Antoine Gizenga, who later set up a separatist regime which the Kremlin supports, leading President Moise Tshomba of the secessionist province of Katanga to state that it threatens a Korean situation
Piece
in
of
the Congo.
shit.
And it was in Katanga that Lumumba met his death. He's shown in last pictures when he was flown in for detention, later to be slain by tribesmen, touching off the new crisis. At the United Nations in New York, demonstrators reflect the chain reaction of tension as the Security Council prepares to debate the Congo crisis. The boycott of Dag Hammarskjöld by the Soviet Union and its demand for withdrawal of UN troops from the Congo are pressing matters of the moment. Mr. Hammarskjöld is to stand firm, informing Russia he will not be driven out of his post, that he means to stay as long as he's needed. Then the Council hears American Ambassador Adlai Stevenson defend the Secretary General and the UN Congo peace effort.
We believe that the only way to keep the Cold War out of the Congo is to keep the United Nations in the Congo. And we call on the Soviet Union to join us in thus ensuring the free and untrammeled exercise by the Congolese people of their right to independence and to democracy.
Soon afterwards comes the violently unexpected.
Yeah, independence and democracy is what.
Spectators' gallery interrupting Mr. Stevenson. Officials call it the worst outbreak to occur at the UN. touched off as if on cue by rioters who are joined by others who burst through the doors from the corridor outside. The News of the Day camera records the tumult that ensues.
Did you see that dude square up with that old guy?
Yeah. Dude, how often has the UN been stormed like this? This is my thing.
I've never heard of this.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Like, you think this would be like a more well-known thing? Like,
Yeah, and I've known about like Patrice Lumumba for like a while now, but I didn't know about this.
Since like some of my earliest readings into all this stuff, I knew about Lumumba, and I never knew that this much was happening around the world because of it. One lady just screaming.
Finally,
Yeah.
with the wild demonstration quelled, Mr. Stevenson said,
Mr. President, may I say that I deeply deplore this outrageous and obviously organized demonstration. To the extent that Americans may have been involved, I apologize on behalf of my government to the members of the Security Council.
Wait, what? Back up. Back up.
He's not apologizing for what happened in the Congo. He's apologizing to the visiting people that are being disturbed by the activists.
Ah, because the activists are American. Okay.
Yeah, he's saying like, yo, all these like, you know, this is
Like,
all.
are you admitting guilt, bro? Are you...
Yeah, yeah.
at his Washington news conference, President Kennedy meets the Congo issue with firmness, adding the prestige of his high office to support for the United Nations, pledging defense of the Charter by opposing any government's unilateral action in the Congo.
The United States has supported and will continue to support the United Nations' presence in the Congo. The United States considers that the only legal authority entitled to speak for the Congo as a whole is a government established under the Chief of State, President Kasavubu, who has been seated in the General Assembly of the United Nations by a majority vote of its members. The United Nations offers the best, if not the only possibility, for the restoration of conditions of stability and order in the Congo.
That's enough of your popery.
Upheld at a new hour of crisis.
5 words.
Nope. All right, what the hell's going on in chat? Oh, that is sick, Pinko.
Yeah.
I would love to hear more about that. Signed his own death certificate. I mean, like, yeah, no matter who it was, it didn't matter if it was Patrice or anybody else. Like the second like they make a declaration, you know, especially in front of what was that, like their prince or something, the king.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that,
Yeah,
like, by the way, we're free now.
Yeah. The first democratically elected leader in the Congo pretty much made a speech being like, you know, essentially saying F you to the king of Belgium that was, as he was visiting, which they deserve. And they continue to deserve it.
I mean, like, you know, he could mean so many things, Frankster, in terms of, you know.
So many places in Minecraft. He could be referring to so many different Minecraft buildings.
The white man has so many different houses in Minecraft.
Love you too.
Oh, no, no. Oh, no. There we go. Says you or me.
I think me. You got food now anyway,
All right.
so you're good. So in the aftermath of the protest, reports cast Malcolm as the leader of a secular revolt that threatened to overshadow the messenger's restrictions against political activism, which created further distance between Elijah Muhammad and his most talented and devoted follower. Malcolm, publicly blamed for the melee inside the UN and protests outside, threatened to sue anyone, including Alday Stevenson and New York Police Commissioner Stephen Kennedy, who accused him and the Nation of Islam of taking part in controversial protests. Malcolm neither condemned nor praised the demonstrations, vowing to permit no one to use me against the nationalists, to discredit a movement after his own heart. At the same time, he balked at media requests to disavow the violence associated with the protests, From the point of view of law enforcement, political officials, and journalists, that's like that first video that we watched where he's like holding the baby. Malcolm's fingerprints were all over these events. They recognized Malcolm's rhetoric as possessing the unique ability to inspire segments of the Black community unaffiliated with the religious teachings he advocated. For a growing corpus of Black folk around the nation, Malcolm, rather than any group he represented, inspired both belief and action. His domestic activism dovetailed with his political support for global anti-colonial struggles. His trip to the Middle East, meetings with African diplomats in Harlem, rendezvous with Fidel Castro at Hotel Teresa, and relations with the Black nationalists who had organized the UN demonstration had showcased his diplomatic side as Black America's unofficial prime minister. That might be the last slide. Can you just move forward real quick?
That's it.
Or just can you just see if there's anything else?
That's it.
Okay. So, like I was saying, like this is saying here, do you see this divide that's coming between Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam? Because Malcolm is very in tune and interested in political activism, and apparently it's one of the restrictions that Elijah Muhammad has placed on members. He wants a very strict adherence to like liberation through theology, or at least under this umbrella of the Nation of Islam's brand. And Malcolm is continually stepping outside of that restriction to deal with these like international movements, Black nationalists, and things like that. So we can see the seeds of discontent being sown within Malcolm's relationship with the Nation of Islam.
Honestly, I'm not even seeing like a path towards liberation with specifically only Elijah Muhammad.
Right.
To be honest. Like, you know, I see like, you know, a guy that wants his church to grow, right? And that's about it. You know, and if the more secular territory it goes into, the less power he has, the less influence he has over any given situation, and you know.
And I haven't studied much of the Nation Islam irrespective of Malcolm X. What I know about the Nation of Islam that existed in the United States is because of Malcolm X. So losing Malcolm X as a representative of the Nation of Islam, like how big is Malcolm X to their movement right now? If Malcolm X never existed, would we even be talking about the Nation of Islam today?
No.
In any relevant way. I'm sure there would be some discussion, but like how much of the Nation of Islam's legacy is tied to the much, like, you know, it's a segment of Malcolm's legacy. Malcolm is the one who has the colossal legacy that has imprinted our culture.
Most people probably won't even know who the fuck you're talking. For the people that are aware of like the Nation of Islam, right? They likely know it contemporaneous today. They know about it today either because of Louis Farrakhan, right, or because of Malcolm X, right? Yeah. But I doubt that very many people like, you know, really know that much about Elijah Muhammad.
Correct. I agree. So that was a pretty good chapter there. I loved how it went into, you know, Nkrumah, and I loved how it went into Lumumba. And then we had, you know, the Woolworths protests, which were super important. We went a little bit more into SNCC and Ella Baker, as well as Malcolm's sojourns throughout the Middle East. And by the Middle East, I mean Northern Africa and Western Asia. So we are definitely progressing here. And I really enjoy knowing more about the history of this country and the things that happened there, because like I said, we focus a lot on the international stage. So it's nice to take a brief visit over into the civil rights area of things.
Do not, Matt, don't say that, because that's going to make me want to be like, all right, let me see it. Even though my wife was literally telling me that no, that movie's going to piss you off. It's all it's going to do.
What movie is it?
The Jonah Hill one with Eddie Murphy.
And what are they doing?
So the plot is that Jonah Hill is a white guy, obviously, that is dating this black girl, right? And he meets her parents, and her father's played by Eddie Murphy, and Eddie Murphy, and his wife in the movie or whatever, they just don't like him.
Yeah, but how? He's so lovable.
Bro, I don't fucking know. I watched that and the new Aqua Teen movie back to back Saturday night, and Aqua Teen Hunger Force was infinitely better. Well, yeah, it's Aqua Teen. It's no question.
Is there a new Aqua Teen Hunger Force movie?
Bro, I don't know anymore. Aqua Teen keeps dying and coming back. every 5 years, and I'm not aware. I used to watch that. I used to watch
There's a new
Aqua
Aqua
Teen.
Teen, not the Aqua, not the Aqua Teen Hunger movie Force for Theaters one that came out back in the day.
Yeah, I remember that one. I love that movie.
Yeah, me too.
Do you remember when somebody saw the what the fuck is it, the billboard, and called it in? It's like a bomb threat.
Oh yeah, it was a Moonanite. It was one of the little Moonanites. It was in yeah, and they thought it was like a bomb thing. Yeah, because there was like little like LED light pads that they were leaving around.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, you haven't answered us. Is it a new Aqua Teen movie or is it the one from before that I already knew of? Oh, Aqua Teen Forever Plantasm. There is a new one. It came out in 2022. How did I not know about this? Wow, I'm gonna have to watch that. It's on HBO. I have HBO right now. What a time to have HBO.
What a time.
I'm about to finish The Wire. I was rewatching The Wire because I bought HBO for Last of Us. So I rewatched all The Wire. I have like 3 episodes left.
How many times have you watched The Wire?
Once before.
Really?
Yeah. Shit. I'm in a Wire shit posting group now. It's so fun.
Motherfucker.
Like like I found it because I was in a Last of Us shit posting group.
Yeah.
And they posted like a cross one where they had Stringer Bell like as like a clicker, and it was like, you need to go out and tell the corners. We click us now. It was extremely funny to me. You need to go out and let everybody know in the corners. We click us now.
My favorite part is where he fucking yells at the dude like, "Are you taking notes at a fucking illicit drug meeting or whatever?"
Yeah, it's a fine show.
I mean, the creator is like definitely like a huge fucking lib, but like, you know, it's great.
Yeah, who isn't though?
I thought I would have a better answer for that in the moment, and I don't.
I guess not Malcolm X.
Did Malcolm ever make a show?
No. You got me there.
Yeah, that's it. Are you taking notes on a fucking criminal conspiracy?
It's good times. I don't know what I'm gonna watch after this though. Oh, don't they have like another like? I'm not gonna say it. I won't say it.
Playing with fire, Frankster.
They'll come for me.
Robert Rules Order, bro. Oh my god. Wait, don't even
I
come
don't want to
at...
spoil anything for anybody, but if you know what happens in like the last few episodes, my favorite character just died. I knew he was gonna die. Part of me like wanted to pretend that he doesn't actually die, and then he did die.
I
Like,
felt
even
that...
though I watched it before and I know it happens, it's like I got so late and I was like, no, just don't do it. Just maybe I misremembered.
I felt that so many times about Boardwalk Empire. Did you ever watch that?
I haven't.
Oh, dude. You should check it out.
I'm real bad with shows, man.
I mean, like, look, it's about New Jersey. It's got Steve Buscemi as, like,
Yeah, I
you
get
know,
that.
the main
Love-
character.
I love Steve Buscemi. I love Steve Buscemi.
You'll love this then. And it's like, you know, there's plenty of stuff in here that you'll be like, wait, I know what the fuck they're alluding to. Like, what they're, like, they're not using the actual names, but historical. Like, there's, like, a Marcus Garvey character in one season, right? There's a bunch of shit. You would actually really love it just because of, like, how history-minded you are.
I'm sure my girlfriend has watched through it once already, but she always wants to watch stuff again.
Yeah, my wife loves basically like all the same shows that you do, like the prestige television of like the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, that's where you get me. Yeah, that's where you catch me. Brother Mazzone. Brother Mazzone. That guy ruled. There is some things about it that's a little corny now that I watch it, like with like an older mind, that like I kind of cringe a little bit watching it.
What, The Wire?
Yeah. And also, as someone that used to participate on the receiving end of open air drug markets on the East Coast, some of the things that they do, I'm like, this doesn't happen. This wasn't happening out there.
All right, so I'm thinking I'll just send everybody over to Famous Horse. Does that sound good for everybody? I'm allowing democracy in chat right now.
Use it wisely. Yeah, I guess I could see what you're saying there, Baldwin's Ghost. That was actually probably one of my favorite seasons, though, man. Frank Sabaka.
Frank Sabaka.
Matt, I remember like rumors of fentanyl like lurked around Camden, New Jersey, like ever since like 2006 or 2007. Like they would actually there was actually times where they actually did a broadcasted announcement in my high school about bad batches of heroin because there was like several students dying of it, and they like felt like it was that's the type of like South Jersey high school that I went to, that like they had to like make like a public service announcement because there were so many drug addicts in my school.
I remember it was my first night.
Yeah, I got some friends that I was in treatment with, that I was real tight with after I got clean, and they all talked about Scram in Baltimore in the capsules.
Was there that many people? All right, whatever. My point is, my first night in rehab, I remember, what the fuck is it? Like, you know, there was like some like 30 or 40-year-old dude, right? Because I'm like talking about like the last time I used, which was like 2 or 3 days beforehand, right? And you know, I'm talking about how like, yeah, it was really weird. Like I only took like the one, and like, you know, my lips were turning blue. It felt like I was like, you know, gonna fall out or whatever. And the guy's just going, "You got a hot bag. Yeah, you got one of them hot bags with the fent in it. You know, that's the good shit." And I was just like, the fuck? The what?
They were the best of times. They were the worst of times.
It was an interesting time.
Yeah, I'm better for having experienced it.
All right, so.
So hey, you know, obviously we had a little bit of schedule shift, but from this point forward, we will return to our regularly scheduled programming. Get back with us on Wednesday for the next chapter of The Sword and the Shield, called The World on Fire. So this was called World Stage. The next one's called World on Fire. Who knows what could happen?
Who knows what might happen?
Who knows what could happen in this historically, you know, succinct book that we could all Google and Wikipedia what happens, but who knows what could happen?
I mean, like, there could be black liberation. They're like, they might actually get it. Everybody, they might actually win. You won't know.
Thank you, Hash Coach. Thank you, Dave.
Shit.
Frankster.
Everybody.
Thank you so much.
Couldn't do it without you.
We literally could not. We quite literally could not.
Quite literally. It'd be really boring if it was just me and Pat just like talking at each other for like 4 hours.
Please don't make us do that.
Please don't ever do that to us. We love you. All right, everybody. Salal salam. Stay strong.
Salal salam.